Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome everybody. Is this on? Testing? Yeah. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the Scottsdale Unified School District Governing Board meeting. Today is October 20th, 2015. The time is 5:02 p.m. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And with that, we'll have a roll call, beginning with Mrs. Kirby.
Pam Kirby. Kim Hartman. Barbara Perleberg.
George Jackson.
And Bonnie Sneed. All members are present and a quorum is present. The first item of order is item 4, approval of agenda. Can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
And a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Motion passes 5-0. And this, just a note for the board, the public agenda is correct, but under item 8E on ours that we got early, it may have the title of approval of minutes of September 17th instead of September 15th. So that's just a correction, but it is correct on the public agenda. So at this time, item 5, student and staff recognitions and celebrations. Dr. Peterson.
Thank you, Madam President, and welcome back, everyone, from fall break. Hopefully everyone had a nice fall break. We have some incredible celebrations this evening. First, I'd like to take just a personal celebration for an incredible teacher and a great colleague for Scottsdale Schools, and she's in our midst this evening. And that's our own Chris Marsh, who has been named one of the top 5 finalists for the Arizona Teacher of the Year, and we'll find out next month that she is the Arizona Teacher of the Year. So congratulations, Chris. Didn't want me to embarrass her, but you deserve it. So, next we have Mr. Tom Clark, for our Chief Technology Officer, that will recognize our Team 7 students. Tom?
Thank you, Dr. Peterson, members of the board, and Sandra. It's really a pleasure for me tonight to recognize some folks that did a lot of great service to the district and to the IT department this summer, and that is the Team 7 program. So I'd like to have some Team 7 members come up here, along with Stacy Parker and Jonathan Blackland. Team 7 is a vocational training program that is offered on each high school campus that allows students with special needs the opportunity to gain real work experience and hands-on training by working alongside SUSD's finest journeymen, managers, supervisors, and employees. Team 7 also includes classroom learning time for vocational safety instruction and job-seeking preparation, such as learning how to prepare for interviews, collect references, complete applications and resumes. The goal of Team 7 is to equip students with the tools necessary for their journey beyond high school, and the outcome of the program is for students to gain knowledge in how to seek and maintain employment while learning social skills and sharing in real work experiences. Team 7 is a 2-year on-campus experience, with some students being recommended for employment with SUSD. Those students selected for Team 7 summer program are hired as SUSD employees and work in Cafe 7, Auto 7, and Tech 7, as well as various other roles in the district. And you can probably guess the team that I was real happy with this summer. Under the direction of Stacy Parker, and the team did a great work for the IT department this summer. Among the accomplishments were they prepped 45 laptops for the TechLink program, which is our program where we redistribute unused computer equipment to students of need. They cleaned and organized the IT storage area, performed printer toner inventory for the district, Keep in mind, we have 1,000 printers in the district, and prepared it for distribution to our sites. They set up new Chromebooks and laptops for schools before start of school year, and they also wired laptop and Chromebook carts. So really amazing work, and really was a big boost for us to get things ready for school this year. So thank you guys very, very much. And I'd like to first recognize Stacy for all this happening, and Jonathan. So much, Coach. Jonathan is the Team 7 coach. And now for our students, Drew Lawrenson, Jacob Waterman, Corey Barton, Cody Muir,
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Stacy, for all the work that they do. Team 7 really is a great collaboration that allows our students to have real work experience that they would not get otherwise. And I can tell you our own employees gain more from the program than our Team 7 participants do. So it's a great collaboration between everyone involved. Next, we have Dr. Mitch Von Echten. We'll recognize one of our Desert Mountain High School students who is a National Honor Ensemble winner.
Thank you very much, Dr. Peterson. I don't know that we have our student, Renee Rule. Is Renee here with us tonight? If not, can I have her principal join us, Miss Nikki Wilford? I'll have her come on up. Yay! She'll be glad to receive this award for her. Desert Mountain High School student and flute player Renee Rule was selected for the 2015 All-National Honor Ensembles, a prestigious honor ensemble and program of the National Association for Music Education. Excuse me. This year, 673 students from 49 states and territories were accepted to this ensemble. On October 28th, these exceptional young musicians will gather in Nashville, Tennessee to showcase their musical ability and to perform a gala concert at the world-famous Grand Ole Opry House. It is a tremendous honor to be chosen for the ensemble, and Renee is the only student in Arizona who was selected. So please give our regards to Renee. Thank you. Wonderful.
Next, Dr. Von Echten will recognize our 5 grand prize winners in the Mayor's Constitution Day contest.
Yes, and if we have our students for the awards as well as our principals, I think we have them here tonight. Could you just join me at the podium, please? Yeah. Absolutely. We should have some teachers with us up here, too. All right. Well, congratulations, you guys. Nice work. To commemorate Constitution Day, the Honorable W.J. Jim Lane hosted a Mayor's Constitution Day contest. The city of Scottsdale received 70 entries for the contest. The contest was divided into 3 categories: elementary, middle, and high school. Scottsdale Unified School District had 5 grand prize winners and 16 finalists. The following students were grand prize winners: Daniel Hutton of Mojave Middle School. Isabel Safran, Chaparral High School. Samantha Bento, Pima Elementary. And Heather B. Lee, Cheyenne Traditional School. Heather, nice job. And Scott Leonis of Chaparral High School in the high school art category. And unfortunately, Scott was not able to join us. Congratulations to all of you.
Next, we have Dr. Dave McNeil, who will recognize one of our outstanding teachers from Pima Elementary School, Mr. John Selkirk.
Good evening, Madam President, governing board members, Dr. Peter and Sandra. I'd like to invite Coach John Selkirk and the proud principal of Pima Elementary School, Amy Uchez, to the podium tonight. Well, tonight we have the opportunity to recognize Coach John Selkirk, a well-respected physical education teacher from Pima Elementary School. John recently received the Legendary Teacher Award. Legendary. And John definitely has earned being legendary. This award is from the Scottsdale City Council and Mayor Jim Lane. Mr. Selkirk has been teaching physical education for 29 years. 29. He is beloved by students, parents, and his passion for teaching about the body system and health and nutrition. Persons from Pima have shared. We are certain that former students who are now in adulthood can still name every bone in their body thanks to Mr. Selkirk. Please join me in thanking Mr. Selkirk for his service to SUSD students and the difference he makes every single day in the lives of children. Thank you, John.
Pima kids can also name all the muscles, too.
Great plug, Barbara. Next, we have our SCA president, Ms. Julie Sinowski, who's going to recognize one of our great teachers from Coronado High School, Constance Jackson.
As many of you know, Arizona Education Association is kind of like our parent organization, and they've been really trying to recognize the good work of teachers in our state. And this year, all the new teachers to our state, their names were put in for a drawing. And I'd like to recognize Constance. She's one of two $250 Visa card winners throughout the state of Arizona. So Constance, can you please come up?
Bring that little one with you too, Constance.
Hey. I was asking, where's the magnetic strip? But I'll actually give you the real thing. Congratulations, and welcome to Scottsdale. Okay.
Great work. Our final celebration this evening is Christine Harrington, who will be sharing information regarding our SUSD showcase.
Thank you very much. Let me just pull this up. Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Peterson and Sandra, thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you what I'm certain you will agree was a huge success. That's the first annual SUSD Showcase, September 26th. Many of you are familiar, I'm sure, because we saw many of you out there. So thank you for supporting us on that day. Again, this was the first annual, and as you can see, it was family fun for all. We did a good job, I think, of really promoting this in the newspaper and on the web and social media. It was a good opportunity for us to connect really with the community at large, not only our own families that we see day in and day out, but those who may never have any connection with our campuses outside the fact that they live within our boundaries. So we had bounce houses, lawn games, food trucks. You see the list there. Again, family fun for all. Also, this event was really, truly about our student successes, our program offerings, our schools, the good things that we have happening here in SUSD. This was not about our vendors. We had sponsors, of course, for the event that were able to connect with flyers in different bags that we handed out. But otherwise, the only vendors on site were our food trucks, and all of them, in order to participate in this event, had to guarantee that a portion of the proceeds would go back to the district. So again, it was all about SUSD and supporting the good things happening here. Our student performances, again, we had all learning communities represented, and Arcadia, the CMAS program, they were kind enough to produce the entire show for us and additionally lent one of their students to MC the event. Again, this being very student-driven. So our results, this was really sort of inspiring, I think, for all of us that worked so hard on this and for our sites that gave so much of their time to be there. We had well over 1,500 attendees, and that's just what we counted coming through the 2 gates. We did have a 3rd gate also open that we know families also came through. But of those 1,500 attendees, we know many of them were not already affiliated with our campuses. So we had 308 families fill out information cards to be entered into a drawing for door prizes. enterprises. 1/3 of those do not appear to be affiliated with our schools. 58 families specifically listed no school affiliation. They told us their reason for being there was they were curious about SUSD and specific school offerings. 35 families did list, in fact, the charter school or the private school that they attend currently, and listed that they were there because they were curious about our offerings in light of open enrollment, which is about to open. And for all of those, we did have some, though, that did not want to fill out an information card, curious what we would do with that information. And I can tell you that all of the people who did fill out that information card are now receiving our community connection. So moving forward, they will be aware of all of our governing board celebrations and the different things that are happening on our campuses. It includes much of the information that we put out in press releases as well. So for our social media campaign, as I told you, we did do an advertising campaign there with nearly, more than 92,000 impressions during the 30 days leading up to this event. But most impressive, I think, is the day of. We had 7,700 organic impressions. So we made a huge impact, and people are well aware that we are on the map. Periscope, this was the first time we really got on Periscope. We were broadcasting some of the student performances live. Additionally, taking viewers on a tour of the event so that they were not able to attend, they could still feel like they were a part of it and able to experience the fun that was taking place. Really fun with some of our Mojave Middle School students who had no idea we were active on Periscope, and they were very excited to see what Mojave had to offer and some of their friends and family that were out there. So that was fun. Now we have a little video. Oops, bear with me as we pop up this video. Amanda? Do we have the video? With it? Oh yeah, you can pull it up off that. Bear with us as we pull it up off of YouTube. I can tell you this was a huge success, and it could not have happened alone. I mean, this was all sites on deck. We had a number of different teachers and clubs that participated. IT provided all sorts of resources that day of, so our sites that needed Wi-Fi or power, they were able to help troubleshoot any issues that might have arisen. And so again, this was really all hands on deck.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have public comments. This is the portion of the Scottsdale Unified School District Governing Board meeting where we invite the public to share their comments. Although we're not required to do so, we value the input of the community, so we feel it's an important part of the communication with our stakeholders. As explained on the cover of the agenda, anyone wishing to address the governing board will fill out and submit a blue card for non-agenda matters and a white card for agenda matters. Oh, this could get us into trouble. Make sure that we're closed out of the web.
Just an old board meeting.
There we go. Okay. For agenda matters, please indicate your desire to speak. List the item number or topic on the white card, then submit it to Mrs. Como. Public comments on agenda items will be grouped into appropriate categories. For non-agenda matters, please take note that action taken as a result of this type of public comment will be limited to responding to any criticism made by those who addressed the governing board, directing staff to look into the matter, or asking that the matter be put on a future agenda. Pursuant to ARS 38-431.01G, no other legal or action or discussion is allowed. Please keep in mind that public comments represent the personal view of the speaker, may contain incomplete or inaccurate information. If the item is an agenda item, we encourage audience members to stay and listen to the discussion pertaining to that agenda item to gain a more full understanding. Please approach the microphone when your name is called and in the order called. There's a 3-minute speaking limit, and Vice President Jackson will hold up cards indicating the time remaining. And in all cases, public comment is subject to reasonable subject matter, place, and manner restrictions. Please word your comments so they are not defamatory or disrespectful in nature. The first card we have is a white card and Edmund Richard.
Evening, board members.
Good evening.
I come to you today because I'm a little bit concerned of what I see in your agenda. First item, you guys are going to be approving a electronic survey method, which is great. It's about time. I understand the concerns of why this was put in place. But what really concerns me is that you guys know about the BRAC, the Blue Ribbon, committee for the elementary school plan, which will be discussed tonight as simply an informational item. You do realize that while you guys did a tremendous effort and getting the public aware of the schools around here, you guys have done really zero effort to make people aware of the condition of the schools and what you guys are going to be doing with them. At this point, I have more neighbors and community members who come to me for information, and I can't direct them to anything within the school district. This is like everyone's operating in the shadows. When people hear about this Blue Ribbon Committee, they wonder who's on it. Nowhere is it posted who's on it. I attended that meeting, and one of the words from the moderator was that the attendees were supposed to reach out to their community and pass on the information. That would be great. That really hasn't happened. You need to understand, I'm a parent from a closed school. If you guys are going to be discussing, yes, we're going to rebuild this or do that, or here's a roadmap, or give a wonderful PowerPoint presentation about anything, you realize you need to get the public involved, because the public's going to have to vote for a bond to buy these things. And you realize, as a neighbor of a closed school, being kept in the dark is a horrible feeling. It's also horrible knowing that no one from our community was invited to be on this meeting or this committee or anything like that. It's not very nice to be left out when you live in a neighborhood with a closed school and they're going to be discussing what to do with the schools. But of course, this is all advisory. As Dr. Peterson said, he's had for over 2 years a plan for this district. Think about this. If your spouse or significant other said, you know what, honey, we're going to address this and have a 2-year plan, and they said in a filing cabinet over there, well, let's not address that until we talk to the neighbors, it wouldn't make you happy. And I'm not really happy about the way things are going. If you guys want to improve communications, please do it. Include the community, and don't be so secretive. It leaves a very bad impression. Thank you.
The next is a non-agenda item, Lori Arndt, followed by Amanda McCauley, followed by Julie Siniewski.
Thank you. Dr. Peterson, Madam President, and members of the board, my name is Lori Arndt, and I am here as a concerned and vested parent of a current sophomore student at Arcadia High School. My oldest son also graduated from Arcadia last year. Tonight, I come once again to speak to you about the enrollment numbers at Arcadia High School. Currently, Arcadia is at over 1,760 total students. Last year, Dr. Peterson agreed to close Arcadia to open enroll students once our enrollment reached 1,700. Other than a few exceptions, he did this. Although I appreciate Dr. Peterson's commitment to closing open enrollment at 1,700, I strongly believe this is still too large of a number. Dr. Peterson, I know that you're a homeowner in the Arcadia area. As someone who is out and about this area, you can see that tremendous growth is happening. From all the infill of empty lots with new homes, the turnover of older homes to younger families, and the mass projects of apartments and condos that are happening in our Arcadia boundary, this area is changing. Once these properties are completed and families move in, we will no doubt see an increase in our in-boundary population. Again, I urge you to be proactive instead of reactive and take this into consideration while making the decision of Arcadia's open enroll capacity. It has also been indicated historically that 100+ students that are in boundary and enrolled don't show up at the beginning of the year. Typically, these are students that live in the Arcadia area and elect to attend a different high school in the area. However, for the last few years, this has not been the case. Due to a renewed and strong effort in trying to capture these students, we are seeing more and more of the local families make the choice to come to Arcadia. This is great news. However, again, this information and trend must be taken into consideration when you're setting the numbers estimated for next year's enrollment capacity. We have made so many positive strides at Arcadia. Mr. Slater and our Vice Principal, John Andrews, worked diligently and incessantly to make sure our classes were balanced and our class sizes were at a reasonable number. They did a phenomenal job at this. However, balancing over 1,760 students at Arcadia is no easy accomplishment. Even after all their hard work and determination, we still have too many core academic classes with over 35 students. Bottom line, Arcadia is too large. Again, I implore you to take all this into consideration and give the Arcadia students, parents, and community your respect and keep our total numbers down. Thank you.
Amanda McCauley, and then Julie Siniewski.
Good evening, board members, Madam President, Dr. Peterson, and Mrs. Como. My name is Amanda McCauley, and before beginning, I'd like to say that the comments I'm sharing tonight are from me as a parent as well as co-PTO president at Arcadia High School, conveying discussions Arcadia families have shared over the past 6 months. At this time, 1 year ago, I stood in front of you because Arcadia High School was drowning, trying to survive far too many classes, bulging with students, class sizes significantly above the district's student-teacher average. We implored you to take notice of Arcadia, acknowledge the overcrowding, and how everyone was suffering. We don't want this to happen again. We thank you for recognizing our struggle, the teachers' struggle, the students, and administrations. We thank you for taking a step in the right direction by publicly announcing that Arcadia would be closed to open enrollment once our overall enrollment hit 1,700 students. Dr. Peterson's letter announcing this cap helped create a positive outlook for the 2015 and 16 school year. This was huge. Coupled with the passing of the override, Dr. Peterson's promise injected our community with more enthusiasm than we felt in years. As PTO presidents, many people reach out to Lori and I about all kinds of issues, as well as positive matters. I'll tell you that the general vibe on Arcadia's campus this year is positive, which, as we all know, is extremely powerful. We'd like to continue that positive momentum. Life is about growing and improving and getting better. So as we enter the registration period for the 2016 and 17 year, We feel it is important to touch base with you again tonight to remind you that although the Arcadia community received a promise to close the school to open enrollment at 1,700 students, the district continued to accept OE students at Arcadia beyond that number. We realize it's difficult to turn families away, but at the same time, we need to recognize that year after year, Arcadia does open its doors to open enrolled students. About 40% of our students are OE, and there is a waiting list. We must stop somewhere in order to not overburden our staff, though, our facility, our teachers, also, and with our students being hurt the most. I'd like to publicly thank Mr. Andrews, Arcadia's assistant principal in charge of student schedules, and Principal Slater for working tirelessly last summer to do their best to balance classes. They did an amazing job. We heard over and over how much time and effort this took, though. This is an incredible undertaking, especially when there is so little room for improvement or for flexibility. They both care deeply about Arcadia's students, the staff, and Arcadia as a whole, and we are grateful for both of them. Although they did a fantastic job, it shouldn't be as difficult as it was. I'm here tonight to remind the district that, like at any school, Arcadia still has room to improve, and we'd like centralized enrollment to adhere to the promise made last year. Close Arcadia at 1,700 students, hopefully providing at least a little flexibility. And I have a couple letters from two parents that also, well, they couldn't come tonight. I'd like to respectfully ask that they be submitted.
Okay. Thank you. Julie?
Good evening, school board members, Madam President, Dr. Peterson, and Sandra. My name is Julie Sanowski, and I am a proud teacher in Scottsdale schools. I am also the proud president of Scottsdale Education Association. SEA is referred to as an association, but really functions as a workers' union. In the face of trendy anti-union legislation, educators all over the nation are coming together to fight for the good of their students, parents, and the community in which they live and teach. Many are advocating for their students on issues from class size, adequate resources, social justice issues, and even providing decent living wages for individuals who work with students. We in the SEA strongly support the core values of Arizona Education Association, and they are quality public education for all, fairness, equity, and respect for all, teaching as an esteemed profession, education support professionals as valued partners, and learning as a community commitment. I am here tonight to share a few examples of the great things going on in SUSD to support these values. It is my plan as a SEA representative to empower our teachers to become great leaders and work hand in hand, not just with our students and our parents, but also with our district leaders to improve the status of our district and our state. Ideally, teachers' input will be consistently sought after in decision-making matters that affect the learning environment. Recently, our SEA Executive Board members met with our superintendent leadership team over dinner to discuss past and present, learn from our history, and look towards the future to develop a better school district for our students to learn and our teachers to teach. Another fine example of supporting the AEA values can be demonstrated through the many professional development opportunities offered to our members. Upcoming AEA sessions include meaningful PD like home financing, personal finance, and pre-retirement seminars, and even using apps and technology in our classroom. These are free to members. Themes do vary, and they are consistent throughout this school year. It is important that we, as a unified school district, continue to honor our own, recognize the hard work that takes place each and every day in our classrooms. And I challenge our district to make recognition of teaching profession a top priority and make SUSD the choice for teachers of the future. A step in the right direction is to pay professional wages for professional work. I realize that this matter is more complex than just a wishing act. Action is needed, and I challenge all SUSD employees and citizens to communicate to their legislative representatives now and on a regular basis and demand that our state start doing what is necessary to properly fund Arizona District Public Schools. Thank you for your time.
And the next item on the agenda is item 7, superintendent's comments. Dr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, and our public. A few comments. First, I would just like to let everyone know that right before our fall break, we had 216 of our families receive 300 meal boxes so that their children would be able to have nutritious meals during the fall break. Otherwise, we would have students that would not have been able to have meals all during the break, and we feel that's important. We'd like to thank the City of Scottsdale, Mr. Denny Brown, our food banks, and our own community specialists for making that happen. And our families were very, very appreciative, and we received some very complimentary notes for the work that was done to support our students. I am proud to announce that we have 40 2016 National Merit Commended students in Scottsdale schools. Also, we have 31 Scottsdale students that were selected to participate in the Mayor's Youth Council. The Mayor's Youth Council is comprised of sophomores, juniors, and seniors that live or attend school in the city of Scottsdale. The council aims to educate, motivate, and empower Scottsdale youth through experiences in leadership, knowledge of local government, and experience in group decision-making. It encourages and supports youth voices with the hope of fostering continued community involvement. Amy Moore and Peter Nye were chosen to present at the National STEM Conference in Phoenix this coming March. Their topic will be Full Steam Ahead, how to transform an elementary school's curriculum and culture into STEAM. And piggyback that, today, I was honored to be able to meet with the Bosch Foundation. The Bosch Foundation, Bosch Company is one of the largest privately held companies in the world, and they have a foundation that donates to STEM initiatives, and their foundation is by invitation only. So they only will invite people that they are willing to support. They invited Scottsdale schools and me to meet with them, and we will be moving forward with a grant to support our STEM initiatives in Scottsdale schools based on that. So I was very happy to be able to be one of 3 school districts in the state of Arizona selected for that today. Desert Mountain Dance Club was selected to perform as part of the Arizona Jazz Dance Showcase at the University of Arizona on Saturday, October 3rd. The dance club is under the direction of Liz Noriega. Their piece, Adam and Eve, was performed during the event. The World Language Department will host an event entitled Strategic Languages for Career Success on November 3rd in the Saguaro High School Library. The event will include guest speakers and breakout sessions discussing career possibilities in Mandarin, Japanese, and Russian. As you heard just a little bit ago, our open enrollment period is beginning. It will start on Monday, November 2nd, and will end on December 15th. During this time, parents of children who live outside the boundary areas of our schools that wish to enroll can begin open enrollment process by completing an online application available on the SUSD website under centralized enrollment. Just today, we received several inquiries from foreign students that families are going to be moving into the area and are looking to enroll. So we are looking to have strong enrollment in Scottsdale schools as we move forward. And then finally, we have more than 200 superintendents across the country have committed to emphasize the importance of school attendance, and that we are working on a drive to reduce chronic absenteeism. The nationwide call to action includes leaders from across the country, and it's a featured ad in Education Week. I'm happy to report that Scottsdale Schools is one of the 200 districts that has joined our colleagues every day to call for our students to come to school. If you're not in school, you cannot learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson. The next item on the agenda is item 8, the consent agenda. Can I have a motion to approve? Mrs. Hartman.
A motion to accept the consent agenda.
In a second.
I'll second.
Okay. That was moved by Mrs. Hartman, seconded by Mrs. Perleberg. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. That passes 5-0. So that takes us to item 9A, information discussion item, campus technology readiness.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Mr. Clark is going to come up and present to us the work that he has been doing in the IT department, and you saw some of that this evening with our Team 7 students, but we are working very hard to make sure that our campuses are fully integrated, online, and are future ready.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson. Madam President, members of the board, I'm pleased to give you a little information on the state of technology, if you will, at some of our campuses, basically across the district. I think the first thing to do is to stop and celebrate some of the accomplishments that we have been able to do as part of the last technology initiative and the last capital override that was approved by voters in 2006. We've added a lot of technology to the classroom, and we've set standards for classrooms on what those items should be, and we've been able to maintain those successfully over a 7-year period of funding for that. That includes things like ceiling mounted projectors, smart boards, document cameras. We've upgraded computer labs across the district. We've added wireless infrastructure across the district. And we are basically AZ Merit online assessment ready. So as you know, that is a huge trend in assessment, is moving towards the digital version of that. And I'm pleased to say that we had a very successful, in terms of the technology, we had a very successful spring with online testing that was completed at about 20 of our campuses. So, and I believe that number will increase to nearly all schools this coming spring. There's other things on that list, but I'm not going to go through each one, but I just want to say that you know, the district has done a good job, I think, of making technology part of the teaching and learning process in the district. I wanted to give you just a little snapshot with some numbers of computers at each site. So these would basically be computers that were funded through the capital override over the last 7 years. And this would be the current count that we have based on a survey that we did just prior to this board meeting. So you'll notice the numbers are different per campus, and that can vary because of the size of the campus, the availability of space for computer labs. We have some couple of our campuses that are more challenged for space, you know, for things like that. And this also would not include a lot of the technology that's been donated to campuses through this parent organizations or grants or funding or things like that. So just keep that in mind while you're looking at these numbers. And those are what the middle school numbers are like. And K-8 schools and high schools. So Coronado High School, even though it's our smallest high school, has a lot of technology on here, and that has been a big focus of the district. So they have supplemented some of that with title dollars and some other funding sources to make that happen. But it's a very active campus in terms of technology. So kind of setting the stage on what we've accomplished now, it's time to turn our eyes towards the future and begin looking at what it means to be future ready. And that's a term that you've heard a few times this year. Dr. Peterson and I and several other district leaders attended a Campus Ready Summit that was hosted here in Phoenix last year. And we had districts from Salt Lake City to California to all over Arizona attend. And basically, the purpose of the summit is to get school districts and schools thinking about what it means to be ready for the digital curriculum, the digital learning environment that is already unfolding, but is not, you know, it's not stopping, it's only growing exponentially. So based on that and based on the work that the technology committee did, the district formed a technology committee that included parents and teachers and administrators, and we even had some student participation on that. And we went through a process to do a little self-assessment on where we had strengths and weaknesses and what we thought we needed to do to close those gaps in the newest technology plan. It's important to keep that in mind that, you know, that plan is now 3 years old. and was designed to support a capital initiative if we had renewed the capital override immediately after the expiration of the last one. And of course, we did not because we had to focus on some other things. And so now we're gearing up to develop a new plan and base that off the district's strategic goals and initiatives, and wrap that technology plan around that process. One of the major things that came out of that plan is just the need to expand the density and locations of wireless internet access across the district. The goal in the initial plan was to target classrooms, and we did. So just about every classroom in the district has wireless internet access. We did not target places like cafeterias and auditoriums and gymnasiums and even football fields, and we get requests for that type of thing all the time because we know that learning doesn't happen just in the classroom. And you know, we have between 6,000 and 7,000 devices across the district every day that are coming to school with kids. And so, you know, there's an interest in providing access in common areas and things like that. So if it's not wireless, it's going to have much less relevance. I think that we will see a lot of the traditional looking technology labs start to disappear. They still have their place for certain types of things and certain programs, but you know, if you can bring the technology into the classroom or into the gymnasium or into the library, you know, why do you have to shuffle kids down to a lab and sit everybody in rows? And you know, it's just not a real natural flow for a lot of the way technology is used in teaching and learning. Another goal was to expand the infrastructure to support that and to move towards a one-to-one student computer environment across middle and high schools. And I think it's also important to note that it's not just about getting stuff, you know, getting a device for every kid. We know that it's very likely that the district will not buy textbooks anymore, and that more and more of that learning content is digitally based, and that means that kids need to have equitable access across the district to that content. It's going to be an essential component for them, and so that means moving towards a one-to-one environment, and that looks very different across the district. In some districts have done it well than others, better than others, as you've probably heard in the news. With some of them have had some not so good results, but also others have had excellent results, and it's an integral part of what they do every day on the campus and has been successful for a number of years now. It's not a new concept at all, but I believe that the district is ready in terms of, you know, we've spent a lot of time and energy providing professional development teachers, providing digital content, and moving more and more towards that digital environment. I believe that we are ready to take it up to the next level, if you will. So in order to do that, you got to have bigger pipes. You got to have more bandwidth. And so, for example, to put it in perspective, we currently provide 2 gigabit connection to the district for 25,000 students. And the recommendation by a couple of national organizations, as well as the Future Ready Summit, was that by 2018, that ratio should be 1 gigabit for every 1,000 students. So that's you know, that's over a 10-fold increase in the amount of bandwidth that we're going to need to be able to provide to meet that need. We're also going to have needs to support that technology in a different way. Calling the help desk isn't going to cut it when you've got a high school with 2,300 students, and you know, you've got to be able to respond quickly and, you know, basically have a shop, if you will, right there on campus that possibly is managed and run by students and supervised as part of possibly a CTE program or some other you know, curriculum program such as that to make it happen. And we have some great examples. Copper Ridge has a very successful program where they utilize students to help students with BYOD devices. So I can't get my iPad or my smartphone to get on the network or whatever. They're helping students and teachers solve those problems, and rather than just relying on tech support staff to do that, simply because they have so many devices. We also need to maintain that standard that we've created in the classroom, where you have a base of technology with the overhead projector and the smart board in the elementary levels, and audio enhancement system, and audio integration with the computer and the presentation system. However, what that looks like is rapidly changing. For example, the price point for flat screen TVs to replace ceiling mounted projectors, we're getting closer to that point where it might be more cost effective to provide that type of access. There's a need for teachers to have a portable device in the classroom, and now there's capabilities to connect that device wirelessly to the television, and to also include BYOD devices and other types of devices in the classroom that the teacher can easily manage. So we want to maintain that standard, but again, what it looks like, it's not going to be the last generation's technology. We also need to complete our voice over IP infrastructure across the district. Currently, we have about 60% of the district complete, and that is an important goal in providing part of that basic infrastructure that we talked about. We have some phone systems where we really have to hunt for parts sometimes to make sure that they keep running, but we manage to keep them going most of the time. Finally, I wanted to share a grid that the technology committee developed as part of that process. When we asked the question, what would it actually look like if you had to roll out a one-to-one initiative for middle and high school, and then provide some different technologies for early elementary and primary grades at the elementary level. So a little bit of decoding here. GML would stand for grade level mobile cart. Science, our department level carts that we have already provided. And again, if you look at the timeline going across the top there, this was written to be rolled out a few years back. So you have to imagine that really the first year of this would be 2017-18 if the district were to go out and seek a new capital funding source for technology. So basically, it would not be very wise, I don't think, to roll out 25,000 or 20,000 devices simultaneously. It's just a recipe for disaster, and that's what you've seen in some other districts. So we are pleased to learn from some other people's mistakes and develop a very viable plan to do that. There are a lot of other questions to answer. That one-to-one, does that mean that we have a device for every child and every student and they take that home at night? That's one model. It could be that we blend that with BYOD. It may be that students have a preference for their own personal device rather than what the district provides. It might be a huge barrier buster, if you will, if we had some kids that had the ability to take something home with internet access where otherwise they might not have it at home. And so that would be important, I think, in leveling that playing field, because if we don't, it will be a big barrier for some kids. And with that, I'll talk a little bit about the next steps from my perspective, and that would be to work this spring to realign the technology plan around the district strategic plan, and then to seek, build a budget for what that would cost, and hopefully develop a new capital funding source to support that plan. So, and with that, I will take any questions or comments.
Board members? Mrs. Kirby.
Thank you for your presentation. And before I start with the questions, I just want to thank you for your leadership over the past several years. very rarely do I hear any complaints about technology, and that's a good thing. So thanks to you and your team who have been working so diligently to get us to where we are today.
Thank you.
So just so I understand, the one-to-one grade 6 through 12 computer to student environment, what you're really saying in layman's terms is that every student in grade 6 through 12 would have their own device. Do the figures you showed assume that there's some BYOD in there, or does that, okay, so you do have some BYOD built in there?
Yes, and I think that would be, something that I need to bring that technology committee back to address, what does that model actually look like? What is viable, financially as well, because we're going to have to be very thoughtful about what that looks like.
Okay, and so that kind of springboards me to my next request. As you start to sharpen your pencil, you're going to have to help me as a board member categorize within this plan what's bond money, because I see later we're going to talk about it, but I see a number for technology of $7 million in the 2016 bond planning. So what does that $7 million cover? What's capital planning? What's that's the devices and things like that. So the obvious ones I get, but the more specific ones I know. And then I'm going to ask you to also add the M&O dollars, because you mentioned one that we might have to have local supervision on campuses if we have all of the devices, et cetera. Well, that's M&O, correct? Okay, so just so we can get that whole picture. And then with respect to the bond infrastructure, can you, when you do break it down, break that investment down by campus?
Okay.
So that, because I know that we're probably at different places across our district on investment levels with the infrastructure, and so it'll just help us understand the trade-offs.
Yeah.
And then I think that's it. That would be just some of the components that I would ask you to include as you move forward.
All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Jackson.
Tom, to Mayor Board Member Curry, I want to thank you for your leadership. It's been incredible to watch the technology your department develop over the last my short time on the board, and your goals seem they're wonderful. I mean, I think it's exactly where we should be going, and I agree with Pam. I never hear any complaints. I've seen your department behind the scenes, and you have a great team you've built. And I was fortunate. I went over the summer, went and saw a bunch of the techs rebuilding a whole pallet of laptops, putting in memory, I think. And I mean, it's amazing what your guys are doing over the summer to keep technology in the classroom. So I just want to thank you for your leadership, and you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
And I wanted to thank you, Tom. One of the things that I find very exciting about this was, well, I wanted to thank the board and your team and the administrators for emphasizing equity when we decided to roll this out across, and that was a huge feat in and of itself, to make sure that everybody pretty much got the same thing close to the same time. And I think that was a very thoughtful process that I really appreciated.
Thank you.
And I can get very excited about the support shops. I'd like to hear more about that. And as far as instruction goes, a previous school where I worked offered certification to high school students. So when they graduated with a certain kind of certification. And I won't go into any brand names here, but it helped them a lot.
Yes.
And got them great summer employment, got them some wonderful scholarships. And so I think if there's any area where a CTE program could allow the kids to learn a lot while they're in high school and hit the ground running with a nice paying job right after high school, I think these support shops could be it. And then they give benefit to the teachers, especially new teachers that come in and may not be familiar with all of the equipment. To have somebody on their campus that they know their name, help them through, hold their hand a little bit, I know the value of that.
Yeah.
So
Wouldn't it be nice to hire some of those graduates?
yeah, that would be great. But it's just great learning opportunity for the kids. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next item is also an information discussion item, item 9B, disaster recovery budget impacts.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. And to follow up on the previous discussion, we have been talking with, and we are looking to hopefully implement some Cisco Academy programs for our students so they can get their Cisco certifications and be totally employment ready if they so choose to go that route when they graduate. This next item is regarding the disaster recovery plan and the budget impacts. We've been working on our disaster recovery plan, and that was presented to you previously, and we were asked to bring back what would be some of the budget impacts, and you're going to see that this evening. You're going to see several alternatives and what we feel is probably a reasonable recommendation as we move forward.
Thank you, Dr. Pearson. I guess it's IT night at the podium. All good stuff. So as requested, we've done some research on what are some of the potential budget impact of having various types of disaster recovery plans. So when you look at this, you're basically trying to balance between what is efficient and cost effective and what do you need in order to keep your key business operations running. And basically, I think I shared last time that, you know, the faster the recovery time, the price tends to go up. Go figure. It's a great model for the IT industry. But so what we did is we came up with three potential models, if you will, for disaster recovery. The other thing that you look at with that, trying to balance is that you come up with the RTO, or the absolute amount of time that the organization could function without having those key business tools in operation. And then based on that, you can determine what's the most viable and what's the most effective model for you to use. As I mentioned previously, these are the key business operations that we have identified. And if you recall also, we are able to recover our HR financial software package remotely based on a service that we are provided by Tyler Technologies, who's the vendor for Visions. And so we got the chance to test that last spring and feel that we could, if we needed to, be able to run payroll, for example, within a 24-hour period, which is probably one of the very most critical, if you ask Mr. O'Brien, that's probably the most critical item that we need to be concerned with. The other things we would, currently we would have to rebuild those ourselves. We would have to, obtain new hardware, install it, build it, and get connectivity in order to make those services viable again. So the start at the kind of at the high end options here. Using a cloud-based disaster recovery solution, basically you're asking a vendor to provide you all of the hardware and host all that for you. And so basically, if your data center were to have a major failure, you could simply point your internet connection to that new off-site cloud environment, and all of your applications would be there, up to date, running, ready to go. And it's just so kind of like flipping the switch. That is a very expensive program. So if you're a bank, or if you're a healthcare organization, or something where you just cannot afford even a couple of minutes of downtime, this is probably where you find most of these folks in this category. And we also calculated this based on what the amount of rack space that we would have to buy, if you will. So basically, at 1.5 racks, other customers may have 20 racks where they're keeping all that up and running in a cloud-based service at a time, if you're a large corporation. The second model is called co-location, and basically what you are doing is you're only renting that rack space from a vendor They provide you access to a secure facility, and Phoenix's area is loaded with them because this is a very stable environment. We don't have earthquakes. We don't have a lot of floods. We don't have, some of the other volcanoes or whatever. So it's a growing market for the Phoenix area to host disaster data, offsite data sites. So basically, we would buy our own hardware, and we estimate that would cost about $150,000 up front to go and buy all of the hardware we would need to replicate those primary services that we discussed. And we would have to go over to this offsite data center, and security is incredible. You got to get your picture taken in the parking lot. You got to get thumbprints. It's James Bond getting into these facilities. I laughed because I said, your data is about 100 times, your data security is about 100 times more secure than getting into our building, and we have pretty good security, I thought. But they also have some very big name customers there. Some of the Hollywood movie companies use facility. We happened to tour one here in the Valley just to get a sense of what it would look like and what it would be for us. And they have generators that back up the generators, and they have a giant diesel fuel tank, and they have cooling towers, for in case the water supply goes away. The building's bulletproof. On and on. And that's really pretty standard for a lot of these types of places because data has become that important. So that would be a monthly cost, which is fairly minimal. It would just be that upfront capital cost, and maintaining that over time, that would be the cost for that. Finally, this model is basically what we are doing currently. We have spent a lot of time talking with various departments, everybody from finance to human resources to food services to transportation to curriculum folks, and basically talking about that point. What is that point where you could stretch and be able to function without having access to that key system for your department? And with the exception of finance, we believe that the district could operate within a 7 to 10 day window without the other remaining key business services. So imagine we can't take attendance online anymore. We have to use paper. Food services would have to manage all their lunch data on paper. Transportation bus routes. We have, the student information system. We have offsite digital copies of that. So, we would have critical information available, but we might be using fax machines and, couriers to get stuff around the district. But we could, in fact, operate for a period of up to 10 days. So within that 10-day window, we've been doing some additional research where we could possibly engage with a vendor and know exactly what we would need to purchase. And they have, working with Dell Computer, has indicated that for what we need, they could provide that to us within a 10-day window. We could, we've researched what we would need to do to authorize an emergency purchase order, those type of things, so that we could react as quickly as possible to reestablish a new data center. And again, minimal upfront costs. We would be able to manage within 24 hours access to the HR financial system, and establish a new emergency internet connection where basically we would turn one of our high schools into the new data center for the district, or something of that building of that nature. And so right now this is what we're doing, and it is really all that is viable for us to do financially right now. We do not have the capital currently to look at one of the other plans. I think that this is something the district needs to further explore, would be the co-location event. I've spoken to a number of the larger districts in the Valley, and there are several districts that are having those conversations with vendors who provide co-location services, and to figure in what the cost is going to be. Although you could do it for 7 to 10 days, it's going to create some problems, no doubt. And with that, I'll take any questions and comments you might have.
Mrs. Hartman.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Tom. And also, I wanted to thank you for the prior presentation on the technology readiness. It's great to see a very thoughtful plan. And going forward, I would be interested in understanding some of those best practices and lessons learned that you observed from other districts. And it's great to see that you're recalibrating it with the strategic plan too, so it meets our academic goals. So thank you. On the disaster recovery plan, thank you for the follow-up on that. I really appreciate it. A couple of questions for you. It looks like we're moving forward with some thoughtful options. I'm wondering, I don't know if you want to speak to kind of RPO, so recovery point objectives versus RTO. I don't know if we even look at it that way, but if we do, I was wondering if you want to speak to that and how that plays into the consideration.
Right.
And then secondly, what I think I was hearing you is leaning towards a co-location recommendation. And if you can clarify why you're thinking that would be actually a better solution than, well, I realize what we have is the third option, but versus a web solution and maybe on a application-based selection process, why one over the other, or if a hybrid of both is a consideration too.
Okay.
Thanks.
For your first question, Mrs. Hartman, the point where we cannot live without those services, for us is a little different because we don't, we're not a for-profit organization. We don't have the bottom line, if you will, although we do have a product that we produce, and hopefully that's learning and preparation for future learning. So, it's a little more ambiguous, I guess, to try and figure out what that point is. So you look at the hard numbers, like things that, running payroll, what's the window there? It's a very narrow window there. So you have to take that in consideration. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but, I think we came up with that window as something reasonable that the district could function at without it if we had to. Not ideal. The co-location, I think, would be a viable solution option for us, and I think more and more school districts are going to be looking at that as a solution. Once you've established the hardware, the ongoing cost is minimal. You have some time and labor involved in maintaining two systems that are basically identical in a lot of ways, but would really reduce that window to minimize the disruption in our bottom line, which is learning, because you're going to disrupt a lot of things in the classroom. Everything from transportation to food services to bell schedules. So I just in talking with the leadership team and Dr. Peterson, we felt that 7 to 10 day was a viable window for us. Okay.
Mrs. Kirby. Thank you. I'm confused. I want to go back to what Ms. Hartman asked. So there's co-location, and then there's the last option you presented, which I'm reading as utilizing an existing SUSD facility.
Yes.
And you keep talking about that 7 to 10 day window, which is under this option. So I thought in your presentation you were kind of headed towards this as the recommended solution, but then I felt like later I heard that co-location was the recommended solution, so I'm confused.
Right. Well, and I apologize for the confusion. This is what's realistic for us to do right now.
Okay.
If Dr. Peterson wants to open his wallet and fund this, I think this would be great. Is the district able to do that currently? No. So we need to build a plan around this particular option. And we need to investigate in the future if the district feels this is enough of a priority that we need to reduce that point in time that we can't live without it anymore to a shorter period of time. And then this would be the next viable option if that were the case.
So this one is your recommendation?
Yeah, this is what we are doing.
Got it.
And yes, so I recommend that we do this.
I just want to be clear. Thank you for answering.
Yes.
Mrs. Perleberg.
Thank you. Thank you for both these presentations and all this information. I concur that your leadership in this whole department, it's really strong, and our district is very grateful for all that you do. So I'm, again, trying to clarify as well, if on this path here, this is doable with the current budget. Is that what I'm fully understanding? Okay.
Yes. One thing I did not mention is we contacted the trust that would provide emergency funding for the district if we had a disaster. And basically, we are covered for the cost of those equipment and reestablishing those services. So that's a good thing to have in your back pocket, and makes this viable, because we may not be able to write a check for $100,000, but the trust could. And they are able, and that is part of our agreement with them to provide that if we need to.
And that coverage was just added this last year. It was just made
Okay.
available to school districts, and we added it to our coverage.
That's wonderful. So if time-wise in reality we start heading down this path, how far do we go down, and how much do we have to spend, or if I maybe understanding that's minimal, before the other option that I'm understanding is a little more desirable? Like, how much money is invested already in this path, when we kind of know we want to go down this other path?
Right. Well, the investment in this plan, Mrs. Perborg, is really nothing right now. We only have to spend money if and when we have a disaster.
Okay.
And then we have, we're building a plan to do that and do it as quickly as possible if we would have a disaster. It's just going to take longer than if we already had a data center established and a co-location site.
All right. Thank you for that clarification. That makes sense. And now here's maybe a final question, and everyone's going to laugh at it, but there's a lot of talk at our state level about funds for schools. How real or imaginary it all is, I guess we all don't know. But are you aware of any conversation that our state is having about technology in our classrooms, supporting that kind of capital at all? Is that?
Ms. Perborg, I am not. Dr. Peterson may be able to speak to that better than me, but I hear very little input about funding technology from the state.
Yeah.
They do make a lot of requirements, though.
I just had to ask it. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
And to that point, the Auditor General had asked us to have a more formal technology recovery plan.
Yes.
Does this satisfy it, that requirement?
Madam President, the report that they gave us the language was somewhat vague, to be honest. It basically said you need to have a plan and you need to exercise it. So, they could, and they very may well want to review our plan and then give us some additional feedback if it's adequate or not.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Jackson.
I won't belabor this, but Tom, this third data redundancy option plan where we're using existing facilities in case there's an emergency, assuming that does happen, I mean, is this something that would be viable for an extended period of time? I mean, could we operate a year from this facility, or how? Because at some point, obviously, we would need to I'm saying if something horrible happens to your facility, I don't know what that would be, but this is something we could operate indefinitely. Is that correct?
Mr. Jackson, that is correct. Keep in mind that the key business operations is just a very small part of what we actually provide. I think I mentioned last presentation we have about 200 different applications that we use across the district, and we're looking at 5 of them. So yes, we could do that indefinitely, but we definitely have some other issues especially on the teaching and learning side.
So the goal ultimately is, if we get a capital override, or I'm not sure of the funding mechanism, to ultimately, hopefully, operate with this plan at the moment, or for the time being, and then eventually go to a what's the term again?
Co-location.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Eventually, that's the goal, is to
Yes.
maybe go to a co-location plan. Okay, great. Thank you.
Mrs. Hartman?
Thank you. One more question. As I was just thinking about kind of the likelihood of all of this, it's really planning for the possible, not the probable.
Yes.
The likely scenario is actually that one of our own employees actually accidentally or intentionally gets into a system and kind of screws it up, or it's actually an external breach. So my question is, it's a little bit outside the scope of this plan, but it may be related to the Auditor General report as well, is what type of kind of internal control reviews do we have to mitigate those other probably more likely scenarios which would actually impair our systems?
Ms. Hartman, great question. We, first of all, we have increased the amount of security that we provide both on the cyber side, if you will, as well as on the physical side to access our data center. So it is a more secure facility than it used to be, and we also have systems in place that are basically intrusion prevention and monitoring. But I'll just use a case in point. If you heard the story about the Sony breach and a foreign country actually accessing their network, they were actually on their network for months and before they even realized, and that's not uncommon. It can be very difficult. It's a cat and mouse kind of game, and it's a kind of a scary reality of the world that we live in now. But we do have standards that we maintain in terms of the tools that we use, the software, security software that we use, and the measures that we take, and very tightly limit the access, administrative access. We also do backup of our data that is not physically in the data center. So if something were to happen, and maliciously cyber via electronic attack or physical attack, we would still have data away from that data facility.
Thank you so much, Tom. Next item on the agenda is information discussion item 9C, Elementary Facilities Master Plan.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I've asked Terry and Danny to be up here also because they will be helping with the Q&A to the end of the presentation. The reason I'm leading the presentation is I've been here through the beginning of these discussions many years ago, and so I have the historical context to be able to help share that during the initial part of the presentation, but a lot of the rest of the answers will be given by Terry and Danny as you have questions at the end. Again, the Facility Master Plan is something that outlines our current status of our facilities and the development of our critical improvements for capital that need to occur. Our guiding principles that we've always worked with, that we've shared previously, are health, safety, and security is number one. Academics and co-curricular supports, we are in the business of education and student achievement. And then equity in facilities, we believe that's crucial and something we're working towards. Optimal utilization, making sure that we are utilizing our facilities optimally. Protection of our investments and sustainability. That's energy efficiency and making sure we have products that with good roofs and those types of things. Community engagement and communication. Our community is something that we will depend on in order to support our facilities and renovate them, because our state, unfortunately, has refused to do that, and they've taken the legislation that they actually had in statute out these last several years. So that's been a problem. And then we want to transform our schools into community assets, because I believe that our schools are the hearts of our community. And when you have a strong school, you have a strong community. When the schools start to decay, the communities start to decay. We've looked at geographic assessments to understand the current needs and the greatest needs of our schools. And then we are moving forward with a community engagement process that will identify ideas to solve our current status and subject those ideas to critical analysis and feedback. You did hear this evening that it was said that there's a plan that's been out there. There has a plan that's been out there, and I think it's important to understand that. Our plan has been a continuing conversation. This plan has taken place since 2006. We have been talking about it. We've been looking at our facilities. We started with our high schools back in 2004. We then moved to our middle schools, and we are now looking at our elementary schools as a natural progression. So I am going to first give a historical review of some of the things that we've talked about since 2006 to show that this is not new. The ideas are not new, the plans are not new, but the plans have evolved. And they've evolved as we've listened to our community. And I think that's what's most important, is we continue to listen to our community. Back in 2007-8, BRAC did work. They defined the concept of a neighborhood school and the impact on facility utilization. Also, in 2008-9, learned about the budget and reviewed elementary and middle school facility needs. Back in 2006-2007, there was work done with ASU in the Decision Theater, looking at our district and our changing demographics and facility needs. In April of 2009, there was a presentation of the governing board that talked about election timelines. And on there, it talked about we needed to look at a bond for our elementary and middle schools back in 2009. We decided to split that out and have just our middle schools, and in 2010, we did a bond for our middle schools. So we have to now look at our elementary schools. So that was back in 2009. Also, in November of 2009, there was a comprehensive facility plan that was given to the board, looked at all of our facilities in our elementary schools, took a look at them, what their needs were, their square footages. It had aerial views of every one of our campuses in that plan. That slide deck was about 150 slides. Also in November of 2009, we talked about bond and tax information. We talked about what the tax implications would be to the district as we looked at future bonds. In May of 2010, again, we looked at the 2010 bond program. There was no increase in our taxes as we moved to put that bond forward, and that bond was approved. It was focused on our middle schools. We also did a renovation of Yavapai Elementary School for several reasons. One was to prototype a multi-purpose room that we could then use at our other middle schools so that we had a viable indoor space for both PE for our students and also for a assembly area for programs and items for our parents, because a lot of our current multi-purpose cafeteria rooms aren't really a viable alternative for holding a large school-wide program. In January of 2011, we talked about our middle school configurations and having those as grades 6 through 8. That discussion then moved forward to how our middle schools would look, and by doing that, our elementary schools then became K-5 configurations. Also in September of 2011, we hired a group called the H2 group to do a full assessment of all of our elementary schools. That assessment was done. That report was provided to the governing board when it was completed. I have a copy in my office. It's about 3 inches thick. It goes through every single campus. It details what needs to be done, the cost, the scope. It also details the notes that were taken in talking with the administration at each one of those campuses, what they were looking at for their programs. So that work was completed starting in 2011. Then in June of 2012, we had a discussion with the governing board regarding the Saguaro community and the Kiva K-8 discussion. Moving forward to February of 2013, we talked about Pueblo Elementary School and changing the school boundaries and making Pueblo a full fly program that would then be for open enrollment, and changing the boundaries for Pueblo to feed into the other schools because it would be a school of choice. January of 2014, we began the master school plan project with the ADM group. In March of 2014, we had a discussion highlighting our facilities plan and future referendums. In March also of 14, we also had a discussion regarding facility closures and relocations with the governing board. In May of 2014, Dan O'Brien had a discussion, a presentation regarding future ballot initiatives that included bonds. So from 2006 to 2014, we had a lot of previous considerations. All of the work that took place that I just went through, there was a lot of work that took place, but we came to the governing board on many, many occasions. We came to the public on many, many occasions and shared that. Nothing was done in secret. Nothing was dark. It was all public. It was all transparent, and we did it consistently. A lot of the considerations that were brought up back then during that time was to close 5 schools, was to make all schools K-8s, was to make the Coronado Learning Community a K-8 and close Supine Middle School, was to develop more traditional schools, to convert all schools to district-sponsored charter schools. If you remember, there was legislation that the districts could change their schools to district-sponsored charter schools. I ran the numbers back then, and we would have received over $20 million of additional funding if we had done that. The good news was we didn't do it because this last year the legislature changed that rule, and now all those districts have had to go back to being regular district schools. They no longer get that extra funding. We also talked about renovating and rebuilding campuses, partnering with private entities to implement innovative programs, to develop campuses under the Arizona Achievement District program. We're still waiting to see what that program will be from the governor's office. The governor took $25 million of school money this past year and is designated to have an Arizona Achievement District. I've been following up with them constantly because several months ago they were supposed to announce what that would look like. Scottsdale would be one of the districts that would be considered to sponsor innovative type programs under that because we have been an A-rated district 4 years in a row, and we have some schools that would qualify to go in and be helped and have innovative programs put into them. We also talked about leasing space to interested parties, and we have leased space to interested parties. We've taken some of our facilities and leased them, and we're getting revenues from them. So that was a lot of work and a lot of discussions and a lot of opportunities, a lot of options from 2006 to 2014. That brings us to this past year, January and February of 2015. We went out and we did community input forums. Through that, we had a master plan results that was reported to the governing board on March of 2015. What were some of the results? What was some of the feedback from our community? First of all, we had 260 parents that gave us feedback, 100 community members that were not parents, were not teachers, were not staff, and then roughly 120 teachers, staff, and administrators of the district. 401 surveys and emails were received. Every school facility was represented in comments. Some people identified themselves in more than one category, and a few people attended multiple meetings and filled out multiple surveys. We were asked our communities to give us feedback and rate the importance of several items. Overwhelmingly, our community said safe and efficient learning environments was most important to them. Then enhanced academic learning opportunities, equitable distribution of resources, good stewardship, academic choice, and to minimize travel time. The next set of results came back, and overwhelmingly our community said they would like to see us right-size school facilities. Reduce or consolidate was down at 86 of the responses. Make school facilities more energy efficient, back to that sustainability, was a high priority, and reducing class sizes, which means we would have to provide some additional classroom space to make that happen. Also, from the comments that were given, we had 116 comments that said keep all of our schools neighborhood schools. Our community told us very clearly they valued neighborhood schools. Someone can say, well, this was skewed because we had a big turnout from the Coronado community. Everybody had an opportunity to turn out. So I think that's important. That's why we're going to go back out for our community engagement, to really engage as many people in our community from all walks of life, from our seniors to our business folks, to our parents, to our professional couples that are just up and coming, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of that demographics in just a minute. So out of all of that work, the main points that we heard was keep neighborhood schools even if it means renovating rather than rebuilding. That we are one district and the older facilities deserve to be improved. Aggressively market students and parents on the positive of our school district, which we've been doing. Our showcase was a great success. And that the communities are eager to hear specific plans. One of the things we heard was when we went out, we purposely did not present plans during that process because we wanted to listen to the community without them being focused on criticizing one thing or the other. We wanted them to be able to give us true feedback. That was difficult for our community because our community is used to seeing a plan and then making a comment on it versus saying, what would you do? But we wanted to ask that question fairly, and we did that. So as we look at our dynamics of our environment, we have a changing environment. This is a population graph from the census from 2014 that shows that our baby boomers are a large population. You can see that 55 and above. There's a large bar graphs that move out. Right below that is Generation X. Generation X shrunk. That means we did not have as many children because we did not have as many families. But as you go down further, you start to see that the bar graph starts going back out again. That's Generation Y. The Generation Y families are now in our late 20s, 30s. They're starting to have children. We're starting to see now the growth of the Generation Y. So we knew the Generation X shrunk. We're now seeing the expansion back of Generation Y. This is across the country. We're also seeing that in Scottsdale, and I'll show you that in just a minute. So as we look at Arizona as a whole, what have we learned? First of all, we've learned that Arizona is growing older and younger and more diverse. So the two ends of the spectrum is where we're growing in Arizona. We're growing older and younger. We have a large population of dependent children and older Arizonans. So under 18 in Arizona, it's 24%. The baby boomers, 50 to 69, is 23%, and our over 70 population is 10.8%. That was from the 2014 U.S. Census. Looking more closely to Scottsdale, you can see that our 5-year-old to our 19-year-old, our high school population, 19.4%. And that our older population is 27.9. So in Scottsdale, it's mimicking what we're seeing across the country. Our younger and our older population is what's growing. And so we're having aging, but we're also seeing with that Generation Y, new families moving in, and we're seeing a lot of new children. So that's important as we move forward. Also looking at housing units. 80% of the housing units in Scottsdale are occupied as of 2013. We're now seeing that data, and I'm waiting for the revised data, but that data is trending upwards, that we're seeing even more housing occupied. And more importantly, it's owner occupied, it's not renters. So 70% are owner occupied, and the average owner occupied household is 2.26. That means the folks that are buying homes and living on them are having children. The renters are typically professional couples that rent homes or older couples that do not have children. But the families now that are moving in and buying homes are coming with children. That's important as we move forward. Looking at the population right now, it's also important to note that our nursery, school, and preschool is 7.2% of the school-age population. That means we now are seeing that bubble that has moved through, and we've seen that bubble. We are now on the back side of it, and we're seeing our younger students being a larger population. So over the next several years, as we continue to go forward, we are going to see more students just because we see the numbers of our nursery, school, and preschool students is a higher percentage. That's a good thing. Also looking at same house population, people have in 2013 had stayed in their home a year or more. I'm waiting for the new data because the new data I'm told tells us that from 2013 to 2015, we have seen a resurgence of folks that have been in their home a long time, selling their homes and people buying. There's a lot of turnover. If you drive through the Arcadia area, you drive through South Scottsdale, you drive through downtown Scottsdale corridor area, there is a lot of houses that are being flipped. There's a lot of homes that are being moved into with families, all the apartments that are going on. We are in the midst of a major, major growth spurt that we haven't had. Now you can say, well, gosh, you said that back in 2009. We did say that in 2009. We also couldn't predict the economic downturn that occurred. That economic downturn is now past, and we're seeing an increase of trending up of the economy in Arizona and most importantly in Scottsdale. So looking at the McDowell Road corridor, it's important. This is from the city of Scottsdale. 3,700 new multifamily and luxury multifamily units are anticipated to be completed and occupied by the end of 2017. By 2019, an additional multifamily units will be 1,034. So that's a total of 4,800 new multifamily homes in the McDowell Road corridor area by 2019. That's pretty significant. Actually drilling down to the population numbers, and these were just given from the Economic Development Office that I received, that from now through 2020, they're looking to have a population growth in the McDowell Road corridor of 15,835 citizens. That's pretty significant. Obviously, that's not going to be all students, but you take the 2.25 and do the math, and we are going to see a resurgence of students coming back to the McDowell Road corridor. Looking at downtown Scottsdale, this is the latest numbers from the Economic Development Office. We will see a population increase by 2019 of 6,600 citizens. So between the two, 22,000 new citizens by 2019 in the downtown and McDowell Road corridor. So we are seeing growth, and we're seeing that happen already. Scottsdale is adding many high-tech jobs, so we're getting folks to move here, work here, live here. Most importantly, the home market in downtown and southern Scottsdale, the strongest it's been since 2008. I met with the Scottsdale area realtors several weeks ago. They've told me that if they have a home on the market for more than 5 days, they are surprised. They are turning homes over in a week. We are seeing significant growth occur in the home market in these areas. Also, we've learned from State Farm that originally they're going to start out with about 6,000 jobs at the new Rio Salado Town Lake campus, but when they're fully built out over the next several years, 15,000 people will be working at that campus that's being built over the next several years. Many of those folks will not want to be commuting long distances. They're going to be buying houses in the North Tempe, South Scottsdale, downtown Scottsdale, some probably North Scottsdale, but we're seeing that. We also have new infill occurring up in the DC Ranch area, so we're seeing some new development there. There's a new development that's going in on the McDowell Road that I just got the plans to approve to review to make sure we had space. 82 brand new single-family homes that are detached. They're their own single homes. They're not multifamily homes. 82 new home development going on McDowell Road. So we're seeing that happen, and we're seeing families getting ready to move into them. I would venture the guess the developers and the banks would not be putting money into this area if they did not believe that we were having a resurgence of population coming back to Scottsdale. So as we look at the considerations to date, I think it's good that we took the extra time, and it's helped us see revitalization occur, because in 2009, we would have went and said, gosh, our predictions were wrong. They were, because we could not predict the economic downturn. Now, in 2015, we're seeing that resurgence, and that resurgence is real. We need to make sure we're well positioned for it. We must plan for the future. We don't want to make choices that drive families away. We want to be very careful that the choices we make have families say, we want to choose Scottsdale schools. We need to look at a possible bond in November of 2016 or later that allows for adequate preparation 1 year from now. So we're looking at a bond. We have plenty of time. I think we need to make sure we take our time, because lessons have taught us in the past, let's not rush. Let's make sure we have good data, we make good decisions. So I think we are on track to do that, and you'll see that calendar in just a minute. So what are our recommendations? People have asked about our plan. I've had a plan, but we haven't wanted to go out and have the public just focus on this. We wanted to get true comment from the public. But we're looking at replacing elementary schools and replacing them with new square footages that would be appropriate for the enrollment we have now and the enrollment we think will happen in the future. So we're looking at replacing Tonalea, Hohokam, Hopi, Kiva, Navajo, Pima, and Pueblo. Tonalea, you see I have starred, and I'll talk a little bit in a minute, that one of the recommendations would be we could complete that with certificates of participation and move forward if the board so chose to give us that direction to explore and bring back to you for future consideration. The opportunity to do that outside of the bond, and we could do it probably 2 years earlier than it would be possible if we were to wait to actually include it in a bond. I think that's important. We're looking at adding new multi-purpose rooms and indoor PE space at Anasazi, Cherokee, Laguna, Sequoia, Desert Canyon, and Redfield. We're looking at a new gymnasium and science classrooms at the Cheyenne Traditional School. We're looking at a new administration and kindergarten building for Tavon. Currently, the kindergarten building is across Osborne Road at Tavon Elementary School. That is a problem. We have problems with crossing guards. We have problems with getting students there for lunch, getting to the nurse. We need to build a facility on that grounds. And by doing that, we can take that current kindergarten building and convert it into a community ed tuition preschool to bring more students to our district. And I can tell you, Chris Thuman's already ready to make that happen. We need to look at roofing, parking lots, and pupil transportation, because the state isn't paying for these things. We have to take care of the issues that are occurring out there. We have to take care of our investments. That means having roofs that will protect our investments. Parking lots end up needing work, just like streets need work. And pupil transportation, that's buses. Our fleet is continuing to age, and we are going to need to replace our buses. The only way we'll be able to do that is with a bond. So here's our initial bond planning as we move forward. And again, this is different from what you saw last year. That plan was presented last year. It's on the web, so people can easily find it because it was presented and it was posted in a board meeting. That bond totaled $185 million roughly. We are now looking at a recommendation starting point This obviously is going to change. It's a work in progress based on input from the community of $140 million. It's all those projects that I had previously shared with you. In addition to that, it is some high school tracks and fields. We have 3 of our high schools that we believe we need to have artificial turf on. 2 of them already do. We see the savings for water. We live in a desert. We need to be water conscious. We also see the savings with manpower, all the other things that go with those turf fields. We also know that when we have turf fields, they can take the use and abuse. Everybody wants to use the fields. Football, soccer, lacrosse, rugby, everyone wants to be out there. We need to provide facilities to do that. Technology. The technology infrastructure upgrades we're looking at are facility upgrades. We need to increase our bandwidth. More and more as we move forward, we have to get additional bandwidth. That's going to be additional servers, additional routers, additional fiber on our campuses. That's in addition to the individual computers that Tom's talking about for the one-on-one initiative. But we need to position our schools for the next 15 to 20 years. We've got to make sure we have the infrastructure to make that happen and continue to operate. Looking at the Tonalea 68th Street campus, my recommendation is that we look at rebuilding that campus. We had made that commitment, I believe, that when we were having those discussions about temporarily relocating to the facility they're in, that we would look to rebuild that campus. I believe it will be a revitalization for that neighborhood as we see the rebound that's occurring in the McDowell Road corridor. We have an opportunity to rebuild the campus. Because the area is seeing significant revitalization, we believe it will support a new facility in that area. And we have lots of opportunities to use the current facility for some other innovative programs if we're able to do that. We talked earlier about the Phoenix IDA. We've continued to look at other options. Another option that I think is even a better option is certificates of participation. They're similar to the lease financing that's done for equipment. They are simple and efficient. They save us money. We can probably look at a 2.1 to 2.3% interest rate on the project. They've been used successfully by many Arizona school districts since 1997. The state of Arizona used them in order to balance their budget several years ago when they sold their buildings in order to get revenue. So it is a viable product that even the state has done and the legislature has done. It does require a revenue stream. Obviously 10 years is the maximum. If this is something that you would like us to pursue, we will do further follow-up. I have not had staff explore it extensively because I don't want to do a lot of work, get a lot of hope up, and then it's not something that anyone's interested in doing. So if you're interested, we will continue to go down that road. I think it's viable. I think with the proceeds from the Ed Center and some other revenue generation that we're doing in some of our programs out there that are away from M&O, because we can't touch M&O, we are able to do this. Obviously, people say, well, this is similar to the Higley project that was done, and Higley's in trouble. Not at all, completely different. Higley built 2 middle schools, actually 2 K-8s, on a 40-year type of program. The problem with Higley was they did that based on district-sponsored charter schools, and that extra $1,800 a student they were getting in order to pay off those schools. When the state changed that funding mechanism, all of a sudden they have a several $million a year price tag that they have to pay that they don't have the revenue for. So they're in trouble. We aren't looking to do that. We are looking to have a plan in place that we would use proceeds that we currently have or would get from selling some resources and revenue from viable programs that are outside of the M&O, specifically our community ed, and what we're doing to grow those programs in both Seoul, community preschool programs, after-school programs, so that we could fund this and maintain a great project. So we think it's very doable, but unless the governing board feels that it's something we should further explore, we will not explore because I don't want to get hopes up and I don't want to have staff utilize time that we can utilize elsewhere. The plan looks similar. This is in the notes, but basically the district is the lessee. The asset is the facility, the land. A third party is the lessor. Basically, they lease it from us, and they provide us the dollars to make the improvements, and then over 10 years, we pay that back. Obviously, we have some ways of being able to make that happen. Again, it's been done for many, many years, and it's a great opportunity. Here's how it looks. Private placement. This is when you go directly with the bank. We've had some banks give a lot of interest to make this happen. This is how it looks if you go with an underwriter and go out to other investors without going just privately, but go out on the market. You actually use a trustee when you do that, so you just have an extra box in the middle. So as we look at future decisions, it's important to know that we are working from previous input back from 2006. This is not a new discussion. There are new options, there are new alternatives, but the discussion has always been in place. BRAC is considering work. They're looking at this as one of the recommendations that will be given to me to consider, but it's not my decision. It's the governing board's decision. We'll be conducting a community engagement process now that it's been approved starting in November. Our goal would be to have that work completed by March. It will be authentic engagement with an online platform. It'll be two-way dialogue with stakeholders, and it will uncover the community's priorities beyond what we saw, because we need to reach a larger part of the community than we did last year, and that's our goal, is to reach out to those stakeholders, and hopefully we would reach over 20,000 stakeholders, and that would be our goal. The final board recommendation then would be brought back in the March-April timeframe for further discussion, and if it was so agreed upon, then we would probably take it in June to ask for a board to approve the call for an election. So the good news is we have time. The good news is we've done a lot of work already. And the good news is we are seeing recovery that's helping us move forward. So with that, I'll ask Danny and Terry to help answer any questions. Thank you.
Mrs. Perleberg.
Start. Okay, so thank you all for this information, and I agree completely. This is a long discussion that's been going on in our district for many years, and I was included in that discussion many years ago as well. So coming from that perspective, one, I know, or I feel I know a lot of the things that have stayed the same and the things that have changed from 08, 09, when we're really digging into our elementary schools and what should South look like, we know over these last few years and during the recession, our enrollment's changed, other factors. So I guess where I am right now, feeling as a board member, is that this presentation, for the most part, raises more questions than it answers. And I think that's where, for me, I feel we're a little behind in the fact that over the last couple of years with that expectation, even though we were dealing with the two toughest years this district has seen, and loss of enrollment and all the other factors, it feels like for me that this district needed to be looking ahead at this point and trying to have a lot of those answers in place to take to BRAC and to take to the community rather than kind of more questions. And so I'm concerned, I mean, I'm going to try and focus in directly on some of the questions that this presentation brings to mind. But again, they're not old questions, or they're not new questions, sorry, these are old. The idea of a perfect size school, what does that look like? What does realistic capacity look like for a campus? Most of our schools aren't at 100% capacity, and for many years we were always told that would be awful if they did set at 100% capacity. So to see in this plan a few schools that are set at 500 and set at that capacity, I would then be guessing that the goal is actually, I don't know, to sit more at 80% of that, under 500. I struggle with that because it's my understanding that an ideal campus would not be under 500, that financially, fiscally, your programs, your classrooms are paying a price for campuses that are under 500. I've never, as a board member, fully understood what that cost is. What is that price that we are paying for having campuses below 500? Is 500 the threshold? what is that threshold that makes those campuses viable, fiscally responsible, so their classrooms are taken care of and not being put before buildings. So those questions come out are still out there for me, and I struggle that they're not answered here first before we take this out to the community, because I do agree with Dr. Peterson very strongly. I don't think there's anything more frustrating and painful to go out to the community and our board and leadership of this district and say, what do you think we should do? This is gut-wrenching. I lived through it. Our whole community, our whole SUSD lived through it. And to thought of doing that all over again at this point, I would obviously rather be taking out a vision of the future and answers to our community now that can give them hope that we have a future of SUSD that is bright, and our classrooms are going to be strong, and our SUSD residents are going to be proud to own these schools. That's, to me, what this plan should show. And I'm just struggling that, in my mind at least, we're not there here with this idea because there's so many more questions. Also, the community, the question of, I mean, I have other questions regarding the enrollment, but and capacity, but we'll move on from that and go to the Tonalea question of rebuilding that campus right now. I think I'm trying to picture exactly what that rebuild would look like, how we're justifying those dollars being spent, that debt being incurred. Again, it all comes down to numbers. What is the impact? Community Ed supplies money to our M&O. If those dollars are now going to pay off this debt, and they're not coming to the M&O, I feel strongly we obviously have to defend that. And we have to have all the reasons why this makes sense, this rebuilding this campus there to look like, or at least have a picture of what that campus is going to look like, what the enrollment will be, what the expectations, and to be able to show some sort of more compelling information that our enrollment trends are going to reverse. I guess I'm just gonna end there and just start off with that discussion. Thank you all.
Got it. Okay. Other board members or response to Mrs. Perleberg? Mrs. Hartman.
Thank you, Bonnie. First of all, thank you for this thorough, thoughtful timeline presentation. Being a new board member, this actually helped me understand kind of retroactively what we've done today, kind of that cumulative knowledge building. So actually I found it really insightful. And then I really appreciate the prospective look of the things that we're looking at going forward. So, you know, this is one of these really important decisions that, you know, we go out for a bond every 30 years. You said 10 or 20, but it could be 30 years in some circumstances. So putting the thought into this process, very much this speaks to me in terms of go slow to go fast, because we don't do it very often. It's one of the most important decisions we make as from a governance standpoint. To that, I'm really excited about the possibilities. Some of the things just to think about as we go forward and as we continue to collect the information is, to the extent we can take the demographic and the forecast information, if we could actually, I know it's difficult, but actually create future enrollment projections, just what we think based on the demographic as best we can. We know the minute we put it in papers, the minute it changes, but there's a lot of upside to what's happening in particular parts of our community. Number two, and we've already got this process going, so I'm looking forward to it, but as part of our strategic plan and our 6 goals, particularly those goals that inform what this should look like, really thinking that through as we incrementally go through things like the achievement outcomes, the technology vision, as well as community engagement. Those aspects, I think, of the strategic plan actually can inform this. Number 3, I'd be interested in any information we can gather in terms of, school size and best practices, what that might look like from in a K-12 environment. Board Member Perleberg spoke to that, so how that may inform us. Number 4, really innovative use of spaces. I'd really like to see us consider, so everything from learning labs to data dens to flipped classroom to community spaces, what all that, when we're building school infrastructure, like you said, a school really builds a community, and it also speaks to where we're headed as a community. So those innovative use of spaces and what some of those things might look like, that might be different yet and differentiating for Scottsdale. Would love to continue our conversation around that. And then separate on the certificate of participation, subject to that, the Tonalea community would like to move forward with something like that. I, as a board member, would support that if the community supports that. It's actually an interesting model, the certificate of participation, and I think we have a unique revenue model with our community ed and SOL and what we're doing that we actually probably could create a pretty decent business plan around that. But once again, it needs to be subject to, does that particular community want to move faster than the rest of the district? Because I'm sure there's upsides and downsides to that. But I would support that if we get feedback from the community, consistent feedback, that would like to pursue that. Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Kirby.
Thank you for the discussion and the recommendation, because what this does is it now gives us a starting point. It gives us a starting point that I wish we could have discussed a year ago, because we could have taken the last 12 months to evolve it, vet it, sell it, and get it to a point where we had complete community buy-in. I am worried at this point that we are 8 months out from a board being asked to approve a bond, and we're just now starting the discussion. I don't know if we can improve it, vet it, and sell it in the next 8 months, because the ultimate goal is to have this thing pass whenever we do decide to put it on the ballot. I did hear a window of maybe acknowledgement that the timeline is aggressive when I heard you say that a 2016 bond or later. I would rather personally get it right and take extra time to get it right so that it passes versus rush to just throw something on the ballot and just close our eyes and cross our fingers and hope that it passes. So please take the spirit of my comments in that context, because while I do think it's a good starting point, it needs a lot of work. So what I heard was a bond plan that is essentially a bet on the come. It's a bet on the come that we're going to have community population growth to fill our schools up. I would suggest that if you were to drive through Scottsdale and if you were to pull the City of Scottsdale Planning Commission documents to see what kind of growth has happened, particularly in the multifamily housing in the past couple of years, there's been some of this growth has already started. To remember Hartman's point, to project what that population growth looks like, I think we need to look back a little bit, because I would suggest a lot of this growth started in 2013. I think you even made some mention that we've been seeing it in the past couple of years, but yet our enrollment in SUSD has continued to decline. So we need to have some honest conversations about why that is. And how do we go capture this organic, I'm going to, for lack of organic population growth that we think is going to happen over the next 15 to 20 years. The other piece that I heard no mention of was competition. It's real. We're hurting ourselves the longer we continue to ignore it. It's out there, it's real. The competitors, be it PV, Unified School District, they're investing in programs. They're investing in their gifted program. We all know that. Be it charter schools, they're looking for buildings and facilities. They aren't going to just stop. They're looking at the same population growth potential that we're looking at. And I assure you, they're going to go after that hard. So we can't expect to capture 100%. I don't know if we could, so far we've captured, one could argue, maybe very little of that new growth. So let's have some really honest conversations about why that is and what we need to do to change that trend. So to that point, what I said was I heard a bond plan that is solely a bet on the come. Here's what I didn't hear, and here's what we need to be discussing over the next 8 months. And the reason why we need to discuss this is so we can fine-tune this thing into a package that will pass whenever we decide to put it on the ballot. It's an honest discussion of enrollment trend data by site. For the sites that we're proposing to rebuild, as well as the sites that we aren't proposing to renovate or rebuild at all, including our middle schools and our high schools. We just rebuilt our middle schools, and we have 2 that are suffering in enrollment right now. So we know that brand new facilities don't in and of themselves drive the kids to the school. It's something else, and we have to put our finger on that. I heard nothing about what we're going to do as a district to reverse the enrollment trend that we've seen since at least 2008, which is as far back as we can go, that I can go on public information. I heard no discussion on what we're going to do with our excess capacity at our existing schools that are not being proposed for rebuild or even renovation. A perfect example is Copper Ridge. And I'm not trying to call Copper Ridge out and pick on Copper Ridge, but they have a school that has 1,900 seats. They don't have all of those seats filled. We have to have a plan for that. I heard no discussion about optimal learning environments, is what I called it. Remember Hartman tried to hit on it. I think we're saying the same thing. What's the best size for an elementary school? Is it 500? Is it 600? Is it 700? Is it 800, 900, or 1,000? I know that I've asked that question of many, many people, and I keep getting the same answer within 100. So I know there's an answer out there. And I don't think this proposal builds the elementary schools to that optimal learning size. So if it doesn't, and if we're choosing not to, then we have to defend why not. We have to sell, because at the end of the day, it's about teaching these kids, not building buildings. The other thing I didn't hear was a discussion of the fixed cost per school. So by that, I mean principals, assistant principals, nurses, librarians, etc. We have our current fixed cost per school, but we also will have some possible future fixed costs per school, and we heard about one tonight, for example, when we heard Mr. Clark's technology plan, when he talked about the one-to-one computers and possibly having to put on-site personnel. Okay, that's over here in this bucket, but now we're going to have all these sites. That's a fixed cost per that site. So, and in that spirit, are those fixed costs the same for a school that we're proposing to rebuild to 500 as the school that we're proposing to rebuild to 800? Do they get the same fixed cost investment? It's a question. I didn't hear anything about that. We need to have that discussion. With respect to the plan since 2006. I think the only board member up here who was here back then was Board Member Sneed. I think I was next in 10. So if I could get a copy, I did not know until tonight that there was a 2006 plan and a 2009 plan. Haven't seen it. So if I could get a copy of that, if that's still relevant, that would be very helpful, I think, for all of us. But you have to understand that in that same time frame, 2008 until today, we have seen in this district a steady enrollment decline. Building new buildings is not going to change that. When I attended all of the community forums last year, all but one, what I heard, you heard Dr. Peterson, safe schools, keep our neighborhood schools. What I heard was invest in the classroom. Now, I will give you, we haven't had the M&O dollars to be able to do that. We have been in an unfunded environment where our overrides failed. We have had to pinch pennies. But work with your team, and I would suggest bring a plan to invest in the classroom along with this facilities plan. And I personally believe that investment will drive the enrollment faster than the new housing starts that are forecasted along the McDowell corridor. So that's important to me as a board member, is to have that. And as I said in the last work study, I do believe there's money coming to public education. I do believe we're going to be getting M&O dollars. I do believe it's going to be on the very near horizon. We'd like to have a plan so we can pull the trigger as soon as that money's released and not have to talk about it for the next 2 years about how we're going to spend it effectively. Because that will give me confidence as a board member. If we have a plan to spend in the classroom, it will give me confidence to justify going to the voter and asking them for $140 million to build new buildings. Finally, with respect to the certificate of participation, again, I'm confused. Is that different than the Phoenix IDA? Is that a completely different proposal now?
Yes.
Okay. So I have similar questions then as I did on the Phoenix IDA. On that proposal, I asked for what the payment structure would look like with actual real numbers attached to it by year. Same thing. So I get that community ed can pay for it. I get that that might mean less money to M&O, but how much? I don't know.
Actually, it wouldn't be less money to M&O because we maintain the dollars. And again, I apologize that you don't have it, but we did not want to sit down with bankers and have them start working that out with us until we had a consensus from the governing board saying it's something to further explore. And so that's why we were waiting.
My opinion on that is, and I've told anyone who's asked my opinion on this, I am not opposed to moving forward with Tonalea, but I have to know what the bigger district plan is. I don't want to just move forward with Tonalea and not know what's happening with the rest of the district. It is an important, we are a unified district, we keep saying that, so let's stay unified, let's have a unified plan and see how Tonalea fits into that plan. Then if we want to use this other funding structure to go move forward faster on Tonalea, definitely something to entertain. So I'm just give me a second. I'm looking at all my notes. Oh, one last thing. We talked about future enrollment by the population growth, et cetera. I happen, just based on some work I did about 6 months ago, the future enrollment based upon the housing starts that were in the Planning Commission at the time by school, the enrollment mix was very different than our enrollment mix today. So when I mapped where all these housing or multifamily housing starts going, what boundary are they in? Are they in Pima, Navajo, Tonalea, et cetera? I happened to see that about 80% of it was mapped to one elementary boundary. That may have changed because I'm sure there's more applications that have been filed since I looked at it, but we need to look, because if we are betting on the demographic data and the future enrollment, and we're only building, let's just say, for example, Tonalea to a school of, I forget the number, probably 500 would be my guess. I can't remember what the number was. But if it was 500, but yet all the McDowell corridor is going to be developed and most of that's going to be feed into Tonalea, well, should we be talking about that? Should we be talking about that? So again, it's a great place to start the conversation. Thank you for putting a recommendation out there that we can discuss and build upon, and hopefully get it to a point when we do put it on the ballot, we can all feel good about it.
And thank you, Mrs. Kirby, for sharing your thoughts, because again, we've been kind of waiting to also hear from the governing board, because we don't want to go down a road and then the governing board says, well, why did you go in that direction? So we've been waiting to hear from some direction, but I'd like a couple of input and clarifications. You mentioned that you have heard a number about an optimal learning environment or size of a school. What number have you heard?
I have heard 600 to 700, depending on who I talk to. I mean, I'm going to put him on the spot, Dr. McNeil. I've publicly asked Dr. McNeil before, and he's answered the question, but I've heard 600 to 700.
Because typically the numbers you'll hear anywhere from 400 to 700, depending on who you talk with, depending on a principal that says, this is the size I need to make sure I know the name of every single student in my school so I can relate to them, build relationships with them, especially in lower socioeconomic areas where you really need to develop that. So again, research is all over the board there on that, but thank you for that number.
And maybe the better way to look at it is, what's the optimal enrollment by grade? So a K-8 would be different possibly than a K-5.
It better be, because you got a whole different facility layout you have to do for science labs, gymnasiums, and everything else.
Exactly.
So,
and we have K-8s that have, even today, drastically different enrollments. And then you take it one step further and compare it to the proposed enrollments, it's not making sense. There's really not a method to the madness. So that's, and if we're short, and I'm not, please don't take my suggestion that if the school isn't built to a 600 capacity school that we should close it. What I would want to see, if we're at 370 today and we need it to get to 600, then what are we going to do to control our own destiny? I don't want to bet on the come of population.
You're absolutely correct. I think the other factors that need to be considered is, because trust me, competition has not gone deaf and blind on me. I've met with BASIS, I've met with Great Hearts, and I've continued to meet with them to talk with them about what they're doing, and they basically have told me they're built out here in Scottsdale. That's what they've said. That doesn't mean some other competitor can't come in, but the big ones that have been the biggest draw for us are done. On the reservation where the 2 charter schools opened up this last year, the second one that was built, when Great Hearts built theirs in their lease, they have a covenant in there that no additional charter schools can open up on that Pima Road corridor. So that basically landlocked what was happening there. That's when BASIS and I met, and because they were looking for expansion in that area, and they got locked out because of the covenant that Great Hearts has with the Indian tribe. So I've spent a lot of time talking with them, trying to look at that. Class size is crucial. That's what we hear a lot. So we have to do it. Innovative programs, you're absolutely correct. We've got to do that. Whether it's foreign language, additional foreign language, in some cases I think it needs to be coding. We need to get coding down into our elementary schools so that we start on a pathway for students being truly prepared for engineering and those studies in college and those types of things. So we are going to look at that. And then trying to make sure. So I appreciate some of these questions or comments that you've given, because it helps us answer it. Copper Ridge, you're absolutely correct. We got extra facilities out there. I can tell you, Mr. Jackson and I went and visited the tech shop in Chandler. That'd be a great place to take part of that facility and put a tech shop, because we think it would be truly viable, it's innovative, and we'd generate some revenue on top of it, because I don't think it's realistic to say that we're going to fill Copper Ridge up. And the reason I say that is when Copper Ridge was designed and built, the whole DC Ranch was determined to be 3 times the size of what it is now. DC Ranch lost 2/3 of its space because the McDowell Mountain Preserve bought that property from DMV. And because of that, we naturally overbuilt Copper Ridge. I wasn't here at the time, but I see that in the numbers, and I see that because I met with DMV. That's what they said. It was designed for that whole master community. 2/3 of that acreage went away to go to the preserve. And so it was never going to be able to be filled up just because of what happened with the dynamics out there. Something that could predict, but then we have to say, how do we deal with it? We're not going to shove a bunch of kids in it. We're going to add more kids because there's some developments going on up there, but we need to look at some other alternative, innovative uses to help co-locate at that facility, to steal Mr. Clark's term for co-location. So we are looking at those, and we're going to bring those discussions back.
That's great. So your point that you just made about the DMV and not realizing what was going to happen, and you built the school, that supports what I'm trying to say about not wanting to rebuild the elementary schools, betting on the come from the McDowell corridor and the development in South Scottsdale. You just made my point, because you never know what's going to happen.
You're absolutely correct.
So please, some of the ideas that you're working on, I would also expect, and I'm surprised you didn't say it tonight, and I'm assuming, but I guess I'm going to ask the question, that the site improvement discussions that are happening with the elementaries and the middles and the high schools, that work will converge with the facilities work at some point and drive some of that innovation that we're talking about and that I'm in particular looking for. And is that a bad assumption, or is that a correct assumption?
No, it's a good assumption, but that's also why we're careful not to say, here's an actual floor plan of what the school will look like, because we have to wait until some of that other work. So we can say, overall, it should accommodate this number of students, but what it's actually going to look like, that is not a good thing to do.
I agree.
So that's why we've looked at 500 students, because that, to me, and the research I've done, that's an optimal school size for functioning. We also know that if, in fact, we see more growth, we will always put in the infrastructure that if you needed to add an extra 2 or 3 classroom wing, you would be able to do that. What we don't want to do is overbuild, because if you overbuild, now you've got space that you're never going to be able to use.
Agreed.
That's what happened over the years. Some of our schools were built for 95,000 square feet. And at the time, the growth was there, it happened, but it didn't come back because people aged out. And now you have a whole differentiation of age of a neighborhood. So even though you're seeing some turnover, you're always going to have some older citizens, residents living in those neighborhoods, whereas before it was all brand new people because it was just that growth that was occurring and it was affordable. So we have to plan for that, and that's what we're looking at. So it's not just the new developments from planning and zoning. We're also, that's why we've been talking with the realtors, because this home turnover is really occurring, and we're trying to get a handle on it. And that's a tough one to really get, because in some cases, the numbers aren't as easy as when you see a new development come into planning and zoning. That was a pretty easy one to be able to work with. So we're trying to juggle all those together and come up with those optimum numbers to make that work. And so some of these facilities that are right now 90,000 square feet are going to be down at 65,000 square feet.
Okay, so let me ask a question. Are we building the facilities to accommodate K-5s or pre-K-5s?
Pre-K-5s.
Okay, so now you're going to really have to sell me that an elementary school that's built for 500, but that also includes pre-K, probably is more like 450 actual K-5 kids, and that's the right enrollment population for a successful elementary school. And I define success by offering the programs that elementary school students in Scottsdale deserve and are used to getting, quite frankly.
Absolutely.
Okay, because I remember when we moved the 6th grade to middle schools, and we went 6, 7, and 8, the argument that administration made at that point in time was, we need to move the 6th graders into the middle school to give more mass so that we can offer the programs that we wanted, the athletic programs, the music programs, etc. That was the justification to move the 6th graders. So that same rationale would seem to me to be appropriate and fit with needing enough mass at the elementary schools to justify the PE programs, the music programs, etc. And you're going to have to sell me that 450, 400, that the K-5 number, take the pre-Kers out, is the right number, because 450 is a far cry from 600 to 700. So.
Absolutely. So that's what we're looking at. And again, the nice thing about pre-K is if we end up having the facility there on Oak available. We have some flexible space that if you grow continually in a school, you can put the pre-K program in one of those alternative spaces in the district, and have a condensed. It's preferable to be in their area of their school, so they're like Cherokee, where they stay in that school once they get there. But if we needed to, you got to have a little bit of flexibility too. So we're looking at all those options to make sure that we can accommodate that.
Mr. Jackson, I think you're next.
I'll be brief. Dr. Peterson, thank you for the presentation, and I agree with Ms. Hartman. Thank you for giving a little history of what we brought to the community from 2006 to 2014. I think it does give us all perspective that this hasn't been done, in a vacuum, and a lot's changed since 2006 to 2014. Obviously, with our community, the economy, a whole lot of things. So that was helpful. Board Member Kirby brought up a lot of great questions, as did my other colleagues. There's very few things we're going to do more important than this, I believe. That's not only going to set our district on its course for the next several decades, but it's really going to have an impact on our entire community. So we have to try to get this right, obviously. This is very important, and a lot of it's done with unknowns. Board Member Kirby brought up several times about betting on the come. The reality is we don't know. We truly do not know what the enrollments are going to be in these schools. There's no way to know. We have to make projections, which seems you're doing everything. Not being a demographer yourself, you were going to great lengths to try to make accurate, thoughtful projections on enrollment. I don't know. It appears to me that South Scottsdale is growing, and houses are turning over. And we certainly did hear from our community that they want their schools rebuilt, their neighborhood schools. So I heard that loud and clear as well. And I think the questions my colleagues had about optimal school sizes and innovative learning spaces are all great comments that need to be taken into considerations. But I guess I truly have what Pam said about selling her on whether a school of 500 or 450 are actual K through 5 students. Is that enough for the programs that we want to offer? That's a great point. It needs to be taken into consideration. I guess I'm just rambling here at this point. But I wanted to say I heard our community. They want the schools rebuilt, and that seems to me to be a loud voice that we definitely need, if possible. I'd like to honor that if we can. It seems to me, I truly believe from what I'm seeing that you're absolutely right. We are seeing growth in South Scottsdale. We are seeing new families moving in. I'm reading it. I've read it through the papers over the last several years. There is a lot of new development, and houses are turning over. And these schools do need to be rebuilt. So we're in a tough situation. We've got aging schools. We can't wait for the luxury of waiting 10 years to see where the growth is going to be. These schools need to be rebuilt now. And so, I want to thank you for your presentation. I think I'm a little more optimistic, I think, than Board Member Kirby. I think we can, in fact, I'm not saying overthink this, but we have addressed, in my opinion, we are and have and continue to address competition in this district. And I do believe this is a good starting place, but I think it's a viable plan. I'd like to see more detail, but I think it is in many cases very defensible. And anyway, I want to thank you for the presentation. I look forward to the process we're going to go through, vetting this out over the next several months, and hopefully making a case to our community that this is a good investment and really will set our community and our district on the course for the next 25, 30 years. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Thank you, Dr. Peterson. Yeah, if I think back to the discussions that we had in 2006, what we were most concerned about at that point in time was how to get all the high schools, the middle schools, and the elementary schools done without raising the tax rate. And now I would love to have that problem, be able to have that discussion again. In the meantime, since 2006, we've had legislation that increasingly entices our competition. We don't know what's going to happen with Classrooms First. We don't know what we've also had 6 years of cuts since 2008. We didn't know the recession would happen. It especially hit Scottsdale families in their home prices. Scottsdale was one of the highest communities of people walking away from their homes because their homes went down so far, and going to less expensive communities, going into rental units. And that hit a lot of our young families very hard. Signs are that that part's coming back. And I think part of it is, if I look back to 2006, probably every single year since, let's say, 2008, when the recession hit, we could have taken the facts and found a different, right solution every single one of those years, because we are living in the most volatile time that we've ever seen for public schools. We don't know where we're going to get hit next with our funding. We don't know where we're going to get hit next with enticement of our competitors. And that part probably hasn't peaked yet. It has peaked in some other states. And I guess what it comes down to for me is that we're the only ones that are constitutionally required to take every single person that comes into our building. So if regulation starts to increase at our competition and starts to catch up with what the regulations that we have, and many of them are for good reason, to protect kids, to protect safety, they're built on a business model. They may walk away. We're not there for that. We're here for service. We're here to service our community. And we have to keep that in mind. Every door, every one of those doors that might close because their profit goes down, we have to take those kids whether we get the money for them or not. So the whole idea of looking at kids as if they're just a dollar sign, we need to be above that. And I also think that Scottsdale, the Scottsdale community, would not settle for what our state allows us as far as square footage per student and minimum requirements for building. We expect more than that. And our kids deserve more than that. So do our employees deserve more than that. So I think if we rush to judgment on anything, this is a long process and it is going to take some discussion, but in this kind of environment, there may not be a perfect solution. And it may, even if we come up with one this year, situation could change down at the legislature to make things appear to be different anyway. I do know other states are catching up as far as regulation. They're starting to look at closing more charter schools down and increasing regulation there, which increase their costs, as we well know. Part of me kind of looks at this as an alt fuels kind of a thing. We won't know how bad it's going to get until it hits the worst. But in the meantime, we have to be there to pick up the pieces. I'm sensitive to the anti-tax sentiments and to the effects of the recession on people, but on the other hand, there is indication that things are getting better. And we actually made a decision to not decide since 2009 because of the sensitivity to the tax situation and to the taxpayers. We have put this discussion off. And in many ways, back when we were talking about passing an override, because the classrooms were the most important thing, we put it off thoughtfully because we didn't want to confuse our voters between the difference between the bonds and the buildings and the override. And we made that conscious decision to put this discussion off so that we could focus on getting the override for our classroom and for our teachers and for our students. I think one of the things that I would like to see as this discussion goes through is to talk about the resulting savings, because most of us, at least in this room, know the difference between bond money and override money. But to focus on how rebuilding our schools can help put money back into M&O. Because a lot of our repairs have to come out of that classroom funds. And if we have newer buildings, and to rebuild 7 buildings doesn't seem to be excessive to me. But if we have the newer buildings, we'll have energy efficiency we can put back into M&O. We'll have repair savings that we can put back into M&O, because we know there hasn't been any. 15% of our building renewal funds is all we've been getting. So I mean, it was talked about our classrooms paying a price, and they have been paying a price for the volatility. The volatility of the recession, the legislative underfunding, 6 years of cuts. Some of our sister schools were able to get an override the year before we did, so people went over there, and we're finding people are so mobile, they just go from one district to another, to wherever the money is, that's where they decide to go. I do want to focus on the service. And also what Mrs. Kirby asked for the fixed cost per school. I'd like to revisit that because one of the things that will happen, that we know will happen, if we close schools or consolidate or change boundaries, we know that we will have to provide more transportation. That's a given. If we don't have our schools in the center of the neighborhoods and they're more than a mile away, I would like to find out how much more is that going to cost us in transportation. And if you can figure this out, how much support would we lose if we decide to pull out of some neighborhoods, if we decide to close schools? Even with the promise of programs, I don't know that we can quantify that any more than we can quantify how many kids are going to be choosing us with a building boom that's coming up. I would say that building new buildings won't change, may not change the enrollment decline, but it will put more money into our classrooms. It will open up M&O money. Closing buildings, I think that's a huge risk. I think we may upset enough people that they would just go to the competition, and it would have a negative effect rather than a positive effect, and they may not vote for the bond at all if they're upset with us. So I am excited to see about the programs and the innovation that might come out of our strategic planning process. And I do think the pre-K numbers are important because it's been proven that they create a pipeline. And once they're comfortable in the school and the pre-K comes in, and if the principals can get to know those pre-K kids, and the parents feel comfortable in that school, we're more likely to keep them. So I know we all rambled a lot tonight, I did too, but I'm hoping that that gives you a lot to think about. Mrs. Hartman, your light is still on? Or Dr. Peterson, did you have anything that you wanted to say to me? Mrs. Hartman.
Just one quick last comment. This has been a really great conversation. I think there's been a lot of really thoughtful ideas and rich conversation. Just couple of just final themes based on listening to everybody. First, really basing it on reality, I think is great. And we talked about enrollment. I remember we actually did have capture rate data, so updating that, if I recall, it was 65% local capture rate and 15% out of district. what that looks like, and really thinking through, applying that to the future enrollment numbers, I think makes it a little bit more based in reality. To the pre-K conversation is a great conversation. To me, that's all about us being thought leaders and what a best practice K-12 environment looks like. We're talking about K-8, but really spending time on what that innovation looks like. Because I think at the end of the day, we can be a differentiator in terms of what we're offering as a district. We already are, but this is just an opportunity. Physical assets actually do speak to what a school is. We're building human assets, but these physical assets surround them and enable them to be successful. So really thinking that through and what the innovation side looks like is great. Just the final last point is on the community outreach. I was really thinking about what you're thinking. It's pretty interesting, the model that we're going to go out to the community and use and potentially grab 2,000, 3,000 folks in it. So just encouraging us to really think through how not only to engage, but to inform, because back to that barbell demographic of under 18 and over 50, the over 50 is actually making the voting decisions on the under 18, and then over 50 doesn't really reflect what our community is. So this is maybe one of our few opportunities, and we'll need to think through what those other opportunities we have, which we do, but how do we really inform them on what this looks like and what's in it for them? Because it's as much as it's an education opportunity as well as it is making sure we have the engagement. So there's a little bit of marketing in there too, but how do we do that in a really thoughtful way so that at the end of the day we're headed to a bond? So this is our opportunity to begin to promote what that looks like. So thank you.
George, did you still have your
If I did make one more comment.
Yeah.
I just want to comment one more time on the certificate of participation financing structure potential for Tonalea. Danny, if we move forward with some of the work on this, I'd like to see more information on the revenue sources, so we can be more comfortable that we've been able to pay for this. That's all. I know Dr. Peterson touched on some, but it was pretty broad. So is that something you could actually put some numbers to?
Board Member Jackson, Madam President, I'd be more than happy to work on some initial figures on revenues, payments, payment structure. I think I heard also this evening, so that we possibly can bring back some more information in a future agenda.
Right. I assume that was what Dr. Peterson was talking about when he said, "Do we want you to continue to work?" I would like to see us continue to pursue this with some of that information provided, obviously, so we're comfortable that we do have the revenue stream to for
lots
this.
Of notes and lots of good work to do.
Absolutely. And the one last thing I wanted to say is regarding this entire plan, and this is, kind of goes without saying, but no one said it, and I do want to say it. Communities, neighborhoods oftentimes are built around schools, and these wonderful neighborhoods and older neighborhoods in South Scottsdale, some of these neighborhoods, I truly believe, and I don't want to oversell it, they will live and die to a degree on what happens with these schools. So that's just an important point to make. We have a lot to consider here with respect to programs and our students in our district, but the city of Scottsdale also, they've got a lot. How that community evolves and whether families do move into those neighborhoods and those houses do turn over and those neighborhoods are revived are I think very much tied to the state of the school in that neighborhood. And I think that's something that I don't know how to quantify, but it's certainly something that weighs on me, and I think we need to be cognizant of that. Neighborhoods ebb and flow, and brand new schools with nice facilities are going to have an impact on what happens with these neighborhoods, these older neighborhoods, and that's a consideration. So thank you.
Mrs. Kirby?
Thank you. And my comment is a perfect segue off of what Board Member Jackson was just saying. I don't completely agree with you. I don't think it's all about the facility. So one last request I have, and I'm embarrassed that I went through my whole rambling and never mentioned it, is For the schools that we're proposing to rebuild and renovate, but particularly the ones that are the rebuild proposals, prove to me that the performance of the school is going to change. Because many of those schools are B and C schools. So I don't think it's all about the building. I think it's what's happening in the building. And I think that's what brings home buyers to a neighborhood, is because they want to be in that A school. And I think Hopi is a perfect example of that. Hopi is as old as any of these schools, and it is thriving beyond anyone's expectations. So as you work on what the future looks like, because it's more, what I'm saying, and I hope it came through tonight, the future for me is more than just the building. The future for me is the performance of the school. It's what's happening inside the walls. So if we could address that as well, I think that's a critical component to add.
Absolutely. But I will submit, and we'll bring the data to you, the physical environment impacts the performance of students. There's so much research, so much proven, so much anecdotal that shows the condition of school facilities impacts the performance of students, whether it's acoustics, environmental, air conditioning, lighting, just the general condition of bathrooms and those types of things. The physical environment, studies after studies after studies, and there's thousands of them, impact also the performance of students. So I get what you're saying, that yes, the programs are important, but the physical environment also does impact. And so there is a balance there. It's not to say one is overriding, because at the end of the day, a quality teacher is number one in every single classroom. Okay. Everything else adds to it.
Okay, so please don't bring me back national studies to defend a position to build more buildings, because that's not a good use of your time, because I'm quite frankly not that interested in it. What I want to know is what your leadership team is going to do to change the trajectory of the performance of some of these schools. I completely agree with you. Teachers in the classroom, most important. So what are we going to do to attract, retain, and reward our quality teachers? Then the second piece I would add is site leadership. Site leadership is the next most important thing. So what are we going to do? And this is part of this bigger plan that I see the facilities master plan being much bigger than just the buildings. It's what's happening inside. It's back to the work that the site improvement teams are doing. There may be some work that your administration needs to do on programs and leadership and things like that. It's a package, not just buildings. And that's just what I want to leave with.
And I agree with you. There's another leg of the stool that you missed, and that is parental involvement. We got to get parental involvement also. So if you get quality teachers, good parental involvement, and great site leadership, you're off to the races. So those are the things that we're focused on.
And I just want to share with you that one of the things that I've been doing a lot of studies on is repurpose efforts. Schools all over the country are trying to figure out what they're doing with any of their excess capacity, and there's some very exciting programs that are going on that involve different innovative programs with community use of the schools that bring their seniors together with our young people. And it's some very, very exciting stuff that's going on, and I can't wait to get more of it and share it with you.
Well, and we're already doing that. We've talked with AARP because they have a huge initiative to have their adults, and they just received a large grant, and they're matching that grant to have the adults be in the schools being reading coaches and tutors and those types of things. It's a very structured program, and it's very, very successful. So we're also having discussions with them. I was at the city of Scottsdale yesterday, and they're looking at a new initiative because they recognize the largest growing population in Scottsdale is senior citizens, and children are second. And so how can they connect the two? And so we had that discussion with the city of Scottsdale yesterday, and the mayor is pushing a campaign, and hopefully we can tie all that together.
Oh, that's very exciting. So thank you very much. Mrs. Kirby, is your light still on? Okay. I don't know why. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Good discussion. The next information discussion item is 9D, the assessment committee update.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Peterson, Sandra. It's my pleasure to be back again and give you another update on everything that's happening in the world of assessment. Actually, be giving you 2 updates back to back, so end the night with the Kyle show, if that's okay. We're going to start with an update on what's been happening with the assessment committee since the last time I presented to you. So just want to reiterate that the work of the assessment committee this year is a continuation of the work from last year. So looking back at the purposes and goals of both years' assessment committees, we wanted to learn together what the best practices are for assessment, what the uses and needs of assessments are in Scottsdale, and revisit the SUSD assessment philosophy that guides our thinking about assessment. It's our goal to develop criteria for an assessment tool that meets the needs and expectations of Scottsdale educators and stakeholders, to craft a request for proposal based on criteria recommended from the large group assessment committee, participate in the review of proposals and vendor presentations, and finally identify or recommend an assessment tool that meets the criteria for SUSD to this governing board. Brief look at the timeline for this year. In September, we had 2 large group committee meetings that I told you about last time, and currently we are in the zone in the middle in bold there, October 1st through January 26th. We are currently meeting in an RFP subcommittee. So this is a smaller group from within the larger assessment committee. This is made up of 12 members, 6 teachers representing elementary, middle, and high school, and then 6 people representing district level or administrators. So we have school level administrators, we have someone from IT, some people from curriculum, and then we have 2 non-voting facilitators, myself and Mrs. Debbie Fowler. So we are working in that zone right now, so this will actually be the last update that I'll give you on the assessment committee until March 22nd when we come back with our recommendation. So our next large group meeting is on February 18th, where we will discuss the results of the proposals. And on March 22nd is when we hope to give you our first read of our recommendation for the assessment tool, with a second read on April 19th. So to date this year, at our first couple of meetings, we have a kind of an anchor article that we've been using to guide our work. It's from the Northwest Evaluation Association, and it's called What Parents and Educators Want from K-12 Assessments. So in our first meetings, we worked in depth with that research study and looked at the different things, as the title implies, that parents and educators want from assessments, and kind of use that to help shape our work, including revising SUSD's philosophy statement for assessment, which was crafted by an SUSD assessment committee in 2009. So it's been some time since then. We wanted to revisit it based on research and the changing culture of education since then. So we have revised that philosophy statement, and we've called it a belief statement now. And then finally, we've been working on the development of criteria for a new assessment tool, and that's part of that request for proposals. So the way that it works is we come up with a list of all these requirements that we feel are important to meet those needs based on our belief statement and based on the best practices that we identified after reading that article. So we come up with a list of all these requirements, and we say to vendors who create assessment tools, we are looking for an assessment tool, and we would require that it would do the following things. And then the vendors who are interested, they submit a proposal to us, and they say, these are how we will meet all of your requirements that you've put out to us. So that belief statement, what we formerly called our assessment philosophy, our revised belief statement developed by the large committee, is that the SUSD learning community believes that the fundamental purpose of comprehensive assessment is to measure student learning, growth, and achievement over time. That meaningful student assessment is standards-based, serving various purposes based on student, classroom, district, state, and federal uses and requirements. And assessment provides timely, comparable, and relevant feedback that informs instructional decisions, shapes goals, and encourages students' passion for learning. So working off this belief statement, we looked at the requirements that we wrote in 2010, the last time we went out for an assessment RFP. And we also looked at several of our fellow Valley School districts who very recently, last spring, went out for an assessment RFP. And we looked at what other districts were looking for and what we did in the past. And we have been working our way through finalizing our list of, right now we have over 60 requirements, and they are split into 8 different categories. I would love to tell you what these requirements are, but as Mike Romanoff always tells us, right now we are in the period called the cone of silence. So we're actually not allowed to discuss outside of the subcommittee what those requirements are. If vendors were listening to this presentation tonight, they would hear what our requirements are and they can get a head start on that before we release the RFP. But I could tell you, like, the categories, for example, are fairly generic. So for example, we have a professional development category, and that's common to many school districts' RFPs. So within that category, some of these 60 requirements are in there, and it is what we are telling the vendors, this is what we require you to do for us for professional development. We have a category for technology requirements. So we need the assessment tool to be able to do this as it relates to our technology infrastructure and whatnot. So our 60 requirements fit into those 8 categories, and that, along with the belief statement, makes up the RFP. So in progress right now, we are finishing, we have 2 more meetings of the subcommittee where we are crafting the RFP based on that criteria and 8 categories, and we are going to release that RFP to vendors in November. Once we get the proposals to start coming back in from vendors, we will participate in the review and the scoring of those proposals and presentations, and that'll be in February. And again, we will come back to the governing board in March for a recommendation of an assessment tool that meets the needs of SUSD. So again, unfortunately, this will be the last official update that I give you, but just know that between now and then, that is the process that we're working through, is finalizing those requirements, putting the RFP on the street, and then evaluating the proposals as they come in. So that is a brief update on what's happening with the assessment committee, and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Mrs. Perleberg.
Thank you very much. I want to go back and get some clarity on the process. If we go back to accomplishments to date slide, it states discussion of assessment best practices based on study from the NWEA. So that's a national study. Yes. What parents and educators want from K-12. So what I'm trying to do in my mind is connect where you go from that national study and that conversation and process through reactions, comments, feelings, philosophies within SUSD from our teachers directly, and how that gets processed into the SUSD learning community believes on the next slide. How does that get incorporated in kind of, I mean, we have the national guidelines and that discussion and that dialogue, but where in the process does that dialogue really become our teachers' process and bringing that all together?
Board Member Perleberg, thank you for the question. The meeting where we worked through the revision of the philosophy statement and the going in depth into that research study was actually a very long day. It was at an 8-hour day that we spent together. So it wasn't a quick activity or anything like that. It was an in-depth discussion. So we began by looking at that article, and then in groups they jigsawed it and looked at. They pulled the things out that they agreed with and they thought were important and relevant to SUSD. That was just one small component of the larger process. We also...
And I'm sorry, how many were in that group that was doing that? In that
total committee? 32, I think.
32 teachers? Or principals, I assume?
Yes.
And that type of thing. So were they bringing... You know, again, in the past, we've always had questions of true buy-in and meaningful understanding. So were they bringing reflections, thoughts from their campuses, or was it just limited to that group?
Madam President and Board Member Perlberg. One interesting piece of this, when Dr. Ross started this presentation, he was very thoughtful to remind us all that this was a continuation of work that we started last year. And so one of the big pieces when we started this work last year was we asked our teacher groups through SEA, our teaching and learning departments, all teaching and learning departments, go out to your stakeholders. What is every use of the assessment tool that we are currently using that we like, or what do we need? So we had mass amounts of feedback as we started this work last year, and we have slides within, if anybody wants to check our extensive assessment committee website, we share that information. This is what we've heard from our teachers. These are the resources that they need in an assessment tool. So all of that shapes this process and these conversations. Remember what our teacher group said that they needed. These are the best resources that they have. These are the things that they wish that the tool or the resource did. All of that was part of this conversation too. And all that shapes then the philosophy and the 8 categories. So it's a very extensive, lots of conversation with processing activities for persons to really think and share their thinking at the table and to collect their thinking and to keep revisiting it every time we get together. It's a great question. So it's not just a random article, it's all what our stakeholders have said in conjunction with the processing activities with our articles.
Well, and I appreciate that greatly because I think it's so important that, at least the majority of our teachers look at what the SUSD learning community believes and they can relate and it resonates with them and it's real for them because that's what will, I think, ultimately give us success in this assessment changes. So thank you very much.
Mrs. Kirby? I think it's your next slide. Okay, the belief statement that meaningful student assessment is standards-based. What I would like to see is what other kinds of assessments beyond standards-based were considered by the group and the pros and cons of each one. If you could send that to us, and how they, and kind of to Board Member Perlberg, but her point of how they got from point A to point B, I'm just honing in specifically on standards-based student assessment. Because I'm wondering, and I'll share with you probably offline I'll share with you offline some feedback I've gotten about certain schools that do other kinds of assessments beyond just the standards-based that have great success with those other kinds of assessments. And the other piece I'd like for you to add is, are there better assessments for kids who are challenged in different ways than others? Is a one time fits all, one size fits all standard assessment the right assessment for every kid in our district?
The short answer is no. There isn't going to be a single assessment that's ever going to measure everything we want to know about a single kid. So we have lots of conversations about what assessment looks like, formative, summative, what snapshots we put in, the grading guidelines talked an awful lot about this too. What's the most important thing to be capturing what students really know and having that be reflective in a standards-based or other report card. But I think, ongoing, if we're going to talk about assessing, we're assessing right now the work that our teachers do, and the comprehensive and extensive kinds of assessment are endless in terms of performance-based assessments, et cetera. But the bulk of our teachers will tell you that the standards or the standards-based assessments, when we're assessing that, standards include performance-based measures of kiddos, speaking, listening, all of that as well. So it's not just about a content standard we might see, coming from a state that's in a curriculum map. There's performance measures in the bulk of our coursework as well. So standards isn't inclusive to just something you'd see on a standardized test. And so that's a really good question because we'd never want it to be reductionist and be seen that way. But we can tease that out further and respond to your question more in detail.
Is the goal of this committee to bring a recommendation to the board to approve an outlay of funds for standard-based assessments?
The goal of this committee is very much to identify a vendor through the RFP process that meets the needs of what our teachers, principals, students, parents have indicated is important about assessment. Very much, that's the goal. And there will be dollars associated with that.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mrs. Hartman.
Thank you. Two questions, and they both were actually related to the belief statement, and you started to speak to the first one. So with respect to assessments, and how do we, kind of back to what, are there I know there are, but is there appropriate time to talk about what those complementary kind of incremental informing assessments are in addition to this? Is it appropriate to have that conversation with this, or is it separate? I'm open to that. And then number two, I just noticed that personalized learning wasn't in here, and that seemed to be a really significant theme to us. And I was wondering if that was purposeful in not being in there, and if it's represented in a different way. Because I always took that as being informed, informing the teacher on how to continuously improve at the support at the individual student level.
Thank you for the question. Without going into detail, that would break the cone of silence. Some of those things might be addressed within the requirements. So, things like personalized learning and multiple types of assessments, big, small, teacher-created, district-created, those are things that are addressed within the requirements. But again, I didn't go into that detail within the presentation. But again, there are over 60 things that we're talking about that encompass many things that you would want to know about.
Okay, well, I certainly honor the code of silence, or cone of silence.
It's frustrating because I would really like to tell you about everything that's in the requirements, because there's,
okay,
I can't.
All right, thank you.
Can I to that point?
Mrs. Kirby.
Because you said it much more eloquently than I did, and that's what I was trying to say, is there's the assessment to see if the student knows the standard, and there's the assessment of what does the student know. And the personalized learning is huge, and it is what our community is asking for, is are you taking my child as far as they can go? Gently, right, maximize. So if the requirements are in the RFP and it addresses that concern, that's fabulous. I'm excited to see it.
Thank you, Kyle. Let's move on to item 9E, the update on AZ Merit communications.
Thank you. So again, some things have happened vis-a-vis AZ Merit since I last presented to you. So an updated timeline on some things that we've been doing. And I should clarify that, just want to reiterate that I will not be sharing any district results tonight. Those results are embargoed. I can't share those with the public until November 30th. So this timeline and the discussion will be talking about what we've been doing to prepare our teachers and administrators and parents and community. So on September 25th, we updated our SUSD.org website with a testing website for parents. It was already there, but we made some significant updates to it. Most notably, we added some videos that explain to parents what the family score reports are going to look like when they receive them in the mail. On October 1st, we met with principals during their regularly scheduled principal meetings and talked about the process, the things that were coming down the road for them, and I shared with them an early draft of a toolkit that we created for principals and teachers to help them deal with AZ Merit when the scores come out. On October 2nd, we updated that Testing for Parents website again with detailed frequently asked questions. Those questions, the FAQ was not written by me. They were adapted by the organization Expect More Arizona. So this FAQ is something that you will see most of our fellow school districts using to help address parent questions about AZ Merit. So we updated our website to include that. On October 6th, the AZ Merit results were released to school districts. So also on that day, my team released the toolkits that they created to the principals, and I will show you what those look like in a couple of slides here. October 7th was an early release day, so principals had the opportunity to begin discussions with their staff about the process and the things that were coming. And then October 20th, which is today, the family score reports were delivered to us. And these are the reports that will ultimately go home to parents. They're the individual reports that tell parents how their student performed on ELA and math for AZ Merit. So it's important to note that those reports are not embargoed, so we can send those home. We can communicate with parents what the individual student results are, but we can't share district results publicly. On October 22nd, this week, on Thursday, we have another principal meeting where we'll be discussing this with principals again and gathering their feedback about some of the next steps. November 4th is another early release, so principals have another opportunity to meet with their staff and discuss the next steps and to get their teachers ready to respond to parents when the scores are released. And then in November, on various dates, we have elementary, middle, and K-8 parent conferences happening. So we want to make sure that our teachers are prepared to respond to parent questions that they'll have during those conferences. And we want to make sure that the parents have resources that they could take away from those conferences or that they can seek out on their own. Also, around that same time, a date that we have yet to finalize, we are still seeking some input from principals. We will have schools send home those the family score reports, and we'll have all schools send them home on the same day, so all schools will receive, or all families will receive that information at the same time. November 30th is when the Department of Ed has said that they will lift the embargo where we could publicly talk about the results. So this is just a screenshot of the covers of the toolkits that we created. The toolkits were adapted from some resources provided to all Valley School Districts from Expect More Arizona. We took their resources and adapted them, made them specific to Scottsdale Unified. Within the toolkits, we have a cover letter for parent score reports. So the parents will get a number of documents when we send the scores home. So they will get a cover letter from the principal that explains what the reports are and how to read them and what the standards and what AZ Merit is, et cetera. They will get the score report for ELA, the score report for math, and then another document that explains how to read those. We also sent to principals and teachers the frequently asked questions that are also on our website. We gave talking points to administrators and teachers. They're not things to necessarily be posted anywhere, but just talking points so that we are all saying similar things and that we are able to respond when questions come up. We gave each school a robocall recommended script. These are the calls that go home from the principal that auto dials the pre-recorded message, and this will inform parents when to expect those family score reports once we finalize that date. We also, this is hot off the press, have a trifold brochure for parents. So you see it's coming soon, it's here. Do you guys have these before the meeting? So you're the first to see these. We will have these available for those parent conferences in November, and we'll have some available at the school for the lobbies, et cetera. So these were actually designed by our friends in Mesa and adapted for use in Scottsdale. We also, in the toolkit, gave teachers some tips for how to talk with their students about AZ Merit. We know that when the students get their score reports, they might have some questions, and they'll, of course, naturally want to go to their teacher. So we just gave the teachers some tips on how to have those conversations. And then finally, just today, we've also finalized some tweets, some social media posts for parents. They're all under 140 characters, so they can be used in Twitter or on Facebook or any social media platform by our principals, by PTOs, by the district, by anybody that will direct parents to that testing website where there's the FAQs, the videos, et cetera. So those are some resources that we have put together so far for principals and teachers and the schools. So in terms of communication with parents, you might remember that we began having these conversations back in August with Scottsdale Parent Council about the AZ Merit scores coming out, et cetera. As I've said, that we updated our SUSD.org with a testing website for parents. We added those videos to explain the family score report and the FAQ. We received our family score reports today, but again, they won't go home to parents until a date in November. I actually haven't seen the reports yet. I know that they came in about 61 boxes to the warehouse. So we have to process them, we have to separate them, sort them, and get them to the schools. So we will do that as soon as we can, and then let them know when they can send those home. Once we send them home, the parents will have questions. They will want to reach out to us. They'll want to reach out to the teachers, to the schools, to have their questions answered and to receive help. Once we go through that process, we will then develop additional information and resources as needed to give our parents more assistance if they need it to go through this process, because this is all new stuff. So just, I believe I've showed you this before, but this is a sample of what the family score report is going to look like. This is a sample from 6th grade math. So you see on the left, there is a barrel chart that will show what the student's score is, and also how the student compares to state, district, and school average. So although that information is embargoed, we can't publicly share it. That information will be in the parent report. And then on the back side, which is in the right column, you see some more specific information about how the student performed in various categories. Similarly, here is a sample of what the ELA report will look like. The left looks similar to math, and it's important to note once again that this is different from Ames because it is reporting how the students not only did in writing and reading, but it further breaks it down into reading for literature and reading for information. This is what the family report guide is going to look like. Parents will receive this in English and Spanish, and this explains what that family report is, what all of the little different components are, and what they mean and how to interpret it. And this is the basis for the video that we posted back on September 25th. So I'll take you now to that Testing for Parents website that we created. So here's our AZ Merit for Parents. And here we have a video. I will only bore you with a couple of seconds of it because it's me talking through a PowerPoint. The following is presented by Scottsdale. But you can see later in the presentation, I'm explaining
shows the range of scores and the 4 performance
how the
levels
report
possible.
works. We also have that video in Spanish, and then we also have some additional videos that are not specific to SUSD. They're generic, and they were shared with all Valley School Districts that they can use. And then we can see here on our page, we have those frequently asked questions about AZ Merit. So really, as parents start to have questions and they receive their family score reports, we'll want to direct them here to this website first, watch the video, read the questions, so that when they go talk to the teachers and schools, they have a little bit more information to have those discussions. And I don't need to show you what the brochure looks like because we have them hot off the press. So in closing, I just want to reiterate that this is an ongoing process. These are just things that we have done to date to prepare our parents and prepare our schools to deal with the release of the scores. But this is going to be a very long process where we'll be digging into this, to the scores and the data for months to come and figuring out how to make improvements and what we need to do as we enter the next round of AZ Merit. So happy to answer any of your questions.
Mrs. Hartman.
Dr. Ross, thank you for this very thoughtful effort in communicating to our community. 2 questions for you. One, I just, in this presentation, noticed that October 20th is when the state is actually releasing the family score reports. And we're going to, so that, does that mean that some parents in some districts could be receiving their reports before our parents in our district if we're not going to release them until November? And is there a risk of, despite all the communication you did, parents still didn't hear any of it, and the first thing they hear is their neighbor got the report and they didn't, kind of thing?
Board Member Hartman, Madam President, it's a very good question. And that has been on the minds of all the Valley districts. So we've been talking with each other and trying to coordinate so that we are all releasing around the same time. So the dates that we are looking at are all within a few days of all of the other districts. So we've been thoughtful in that, because that's what we don't want to happen is, oh, so well, my friends in this other district already have our reports, where are ours? That type of thing. So yes, that's a great question, and we've been thoughtful about that.
Okay, and then, thank you. And then my second question is, the talking points that have already been shared with the administrators and the teachers. Do you want to give the governing board members any talking points either, so we can kind of stay on script?
Oh, absolutely.
With you as well?
I'll give you the same ones.
Okay, great.
You bet.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Oh, thank you. Do you want to add? Okay.
Nicely done, Tyler.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Next item on the agenda is item 10, future items. Board members may propose topics for future consideration. Mrs. Hartman? Are you still, okay. Okay, we have pretty full tentative topics calendar, so the dates of the next upcoming meetings are Thursday, November 12th at 12 p.m. We have a study session. And at 11 o'clock, there's a student hearing too, okay, on that day. On Tuesday, November 17th at 5 p.m., there's a regular governing board meeting. Thursday, December 10th. Wow, we're looking at December already. 10 a.m. study session. Thursday, December 10th at 12 o'clock, an executive session. And Tuesday, December 15th at 5 o'clock, a regular governing board meeting. At this time, I'd like to ask for governing board reports. Mrs. Hartman?
Thank you. So I've been working hard for my pay, and so the activity since the last board session. From a community outreach perspective, attended the Center for Future of Arizona Vision 2025 breakfast, which really focused on education in the state of Arizona, which was just an excellent overview, but in addition had the opportunity to meet with a leadership member from Arizona State and talk about adaptive mathematics and what that may look like and bring it to K-12. And so working with Dr. Peterson and Dr. Svensson on connecting those dots. Attended the AZ Case Center for After School Excellence, actually their quality assessment tool workshop, and it was great to see Larry Conte was there. We were there represented, and we're looking at our students and their performance 24/7, or exploring what those quality standards look like. So it's outside the classroom assessment, so that was terrific. From a community partnership perspective, Board Member Jackson and I, you can speak to this too, have been working with both the bus organization as well as the SUSD Foundation and Scottsdale Parent Council to figure out how we can more clearly align our resources and support our district in even a more meaningful way. Dr. Peterson already mentioned I had the opportunity to meet actually leadership member from Experience Corps. And ARP, and so we're working together to figure out what an interesting literacy program might look like for our district, particularly our Title I schools, and then had the opportunity to meet with leaders from a private university, and Dr. Peterson is collaborating with that as well on what a K-12 student pipeline might look like, including scholarships into a private university opportunity for some of the students that are interested. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson.
I'll be brief. Dr. Peterson touched on it, but I had the opportunity to go with Dr. Peterson down to visit Tech Shop in Chandler. They have aligned with ASU and are doing, it's kind of an amazing program if you've ever seen it, but they are interested in potentially in collaborating with our district in bringing those facilities to Scottsdale. So Dr. Peterson is trying to figure out a way to make that happen, I think. And so anyway, it's pretty exciting.
Thank you. Well, I had the opportunity to meet with the executive director of BUS one-on-one, and then introduce her to the executive director of Scottsdale Leadership. Scottsdale Leadership is known for incubating nonprofit efforts to help children in the city of Scottsdale, and they are focused on sustainability And so seems like they would have a good partnership. So I got those two together and got to participate in the Scottsdale Leadership Education Day with Mr. Jackson. And it was very interesting. One of the activities that we did together was give the participants, we broke them up into governing boards of 5 and just out of cold gave them mostly scenarios that there is no good answer for, but that's usually what we're faced with anyway. So and they got to contemplate what they would do, and they came up with some really creative suggestions, which I wrote down and handed to Dr. Peterson, a couple of them. So that was really, it was very interesting. And they were mostly, I think most of the comments that we got back with the thank you cards that I received, as soon as they got done and went to report back what their vote was, we reminded them that all of the deliberation that they had just done would have had to been done in this format in front of anybody who wished to sit in front of them, and that would be the only way that they could deliberate. And I think that was an eye-opener for a lot of them. So it was very fun. Great activity. So with that, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, everyone.